Okay, good morning and welcome. I'm Gina Kwan, Executive Director of the Center for Christianity and Psychoanalysis. It's a joy to gather with you. Today we have the privilege of learning from Dr. Martha Stark on the holding and provocation, navigating the edge between support and challenge in contemporary psychodynamic theory. At the center, we share Dr. Stark's commitment to ongoing growth, learning from lived clinical experience, and refining theory from the room outward, what she calls moving from the small to all. We're a generative community devoted to lifelong learning, formation, and service. So now for some housekeeping to support our time together, please keep your microphones muted unless invited to speak. We will not have a formal break, so take the break that you need. If questions arise during the presentation, please post them in chat. We'll have some Q&A discussion after the presentation. And we may run a few minutes over time at Dr. Stark's discretion, so please feel free to stay or leave as needed. If you're chewing or eating, please kindly turn your camera off just to reduce the distraction. And for those who are attending for CE credits, you'll receive a follow-up email with the course evaluation link. You'll just need to submit the evaluation to receive your CE certificate by email. CE credit is only available to those who are attending live real-time Zoom attendance with their cameras on. And all registrants who are here today will receive the recording for later viewing. Special announcements. Dr. Stark offers free spot supervision by Zoom on Thursdays from 9 o'clock to 10:30 Pacific time, 12 o'clock to 1:30 Eastern time, live and recorded on her private YouTube channel. It's a terrific way to see her method applied to real cases. So if you're interested, you can email her at her email address, which I'll include in the chat box, as well as send in the follow-up email. So please join us. It's a wonderful time we have together. It's a great community. And save the date. Dr. Stark has offered another 2-hour Zoom in the future on Saturday, April 25th, 2026. And if you're on the center's or Dr. Stark's email list, you'll receive more details in the future regarding that discussion. It will be on memory is a verb and not a noun, which I am so excited about. So now I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Teresa Tisdale to introduce our honored speaker, Dr. Martha Stark.
Thank you, Gina, by the way. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thank you, Gina. And it's a pleasure for me to be here with all of you today. And I'm so pleased and energized by what the center under Gina's leadership is doing, and Sean's presence on the board and others. So it's really a delight to be able to see the evolving of that, and also to have the deep, deep honor and privilege to introduce to you Martha Stark. I first met Martha in the fall of 1996 when I was an intern at the Massachusetts Mental Health Center, and Martha was on a panel of speakers from the Boston Change Process Study Group, where I also got to hear Dr. Daniel Stern and his wife present. And that was the first time I heard Martha, and I knew immediately that she was someone whose life and work I wanted to follow. So I continued on in my own professional life, and when it brought me to a university where I was allowed and invited to develop a psychoanalytic psychotherapy sequence, there was no other choice for my textbook but Martha's Modes of Therapeutic Action, which I hope all of you are familiar with. And if you're not, I highly, highly recommend it. It's been in our stable of readings for over a decade. So it's a personal and professional honor and privilege to introduce you to Martha. Martha is a graduate of Harvard Medical School and the Boston Psychoanalytic Institute, and she's a holistic adult and child psychiatric and integrative psychoanalyst in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and divides her time between there and Clearwater, Florida. She has served as a longtime clinical faculty part-time at the Harvard Medical School and is a co-founder and co-director of the Center for Psychoanalytic Studies at William James College. Additionally, she holds appointments as voluntary assistant professor of psychiatry at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine and as adjunct faculty in the doctoral counseling program at the Asia Graduate School of Theology in the Philippines. Martha is the creator and developer of the Stark method of psychodynamic synergy. And Gina will give you the web address in the chat. I highly recommend to you to become more familiar with Martha's work. She's the author of 9 books, very influential, that explore the integration of psychodynamic theory in clinical practice, including Relentless Hope, The Refusal to Grieve, and the award-winning 1999 Modes of Therapeutic Action, Knowledge, Experience, and Relationship. And for that book, she received the Jason Aronson prestigious Book of the Year award. Dr. Stark has been steadily gaining recognition for her ability to provide a comprehensive and compelling conceptual framework that illuminates the psychotherapeutic process as a powerful catalyst for personal renewal and resilience. It's one of the things I continue to be amazed by, that Martha can synthesize the whole spectrum of 125 plus years of psychoanalysis into an accessibly written presentation of how we apply that clinically. And as analysts and therapists, what are we focusing on that are demonstrated ways of facilitating lasting change? And her books, as I mentioned, are considered essential reading in psychoanalytic training institutes and psychoanalytic psychotherapy training programs across the US and internationally. Martha brings her synergistic paradigm to life and extends its global reach through weekly 90-minute free spot supervision Zoom sessions, which Gina mentioned. And it's a vibrant international forum offering clinicians from diverse cultures and disciplines the opportunity to witness and reflect upon the application of the Stark psychodynamic synergy method to the art and science of complex therapeutic work. And I just want to say again, I am so deeply impacted by Martha's work and have been personally and professionally. And the word I hope stays with you from today is her generosity and her generative engagement with decades and decades and decades of analysts and psychotherapists. Many of her books she gives away free, her supervision is free. I'm astounded really by her generosity and generativity and how much she cares for the next generation, and indeed many beyond. So would you join me in welcoming to our community Dr. Martha Stark?
Oh, thank you so much, Teresa, and thank you, Gina. After such a lovely introduction, I just really hope that I don't do like a bad job or something, but I'm excited about this. I've presented to you all before, and many of you I know. And let me say, those spot supervision Zoom sessions, thank you for referencing them. They're both live and recorded for later viewing on my private YouTube channel. All right, so let me see here. Okay, I'm going to try to get myself situated here. So I'm going to share. This is the part that's always a little anxiety provoking for me. Can you see indeed my slides?
Yes.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Oh, good. That's perfect. All right, so let's see. Here we go. All right, the holding and the provocation. So support and challenge. Navigating the edge between them. And I want to give special thanks to Gina and to Teresa and to Sean Hoffer. All right. The essence of therapeutic choreography. First, the holding, and then the provocation, and then the holding, and then the provocation, and then the holding, and then the provocation. So wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. So it's not like, well, the first half of therapy is the holding, the second half is provocation. No, it's a both. And on some level, in ever more rapid succession, and sort of think in your mind EMDR or some other thing, but left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, and analytic wisdom of the left brain and the more emotional, relational wisdom of the right brain. Bah, 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 bah. So that's kind of to create optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experiences is the way I've sort of finally, over the decades, come to sort of appreciate what I think is at the heart of the therapeutic action in deep embodied treatments. And I'm very much into dance, as many of you who know me know that I am. And so that seemed a very appropriate image. The essence of therapeutic choreography. It's choreography. So the holding. So we'll be talking about homeostatic attunement, being with the patient where she is, moment by moment, affectively. And then the provocation, introducing disruptive attunement, those terms, which is directing the patient's attention to elsewhere. In other words, where you would like her to be, but it is still attuned, but it's you interjecting a little more of you into the intervention that you're offering. And these terms, homeostatic attunement, disruptive attunement, I'd always thought that was Salman Akhtar's terms because he develops them in his 2012 book. So I was on the panel at the Harvard Medical School, that thing I co-direct and so on over the course of 25 years. And so I said homeostatic attunement and disruptive attunement, Salman Akhtar. But on the panel with me was Jim Herzog. And he very graciously said, excuse me, Martha, but actually back in the late 1990s, it was I who introduced those terms. So he said, but Salman did admittedly develop them. So anyway, so it's both Jim Herzog and Salman Akhtar. They're fabulous terms. So homeostatic attunement, the holding, disruptive attunement, the provocation, the holding. Okay, homeostatic attunement, being with the patient exactly where she is moment by moment. I'm going to be saying a lot more about this. It's about being with her where she is, not where she theoretically, where deep in her unconscious she might be, but actually more on the surface of things, where she is, what she's aware of feeling, where she is moment by moment. And Al Peso did such a beautiful job and of teaching all of us the micro tracking moment by moment, attending to the patient's body, attending to what they're conveying non-verbally and what they're saying. So homeostatic attunement, homeostasis is a good word here. We'll get back to that later. And empathic attunement that maintains and does not disrupt homeostasis. Whatever the homeostasis might be, homeostatic balance might be, we're not, when we're doing the holding, we're not disrupting it. The status quo, no matter how dysfunctional of the patient's defenses, and later I'll be getting into this, it's not that you, as part of your empathic attunement, you are agreeing, I agree, you should be retreating in the face of your anxiety about being in relationship. It's not about I. Empathic attunement, empathy, is about decentering from I and joining alongside the patient. This is a la Bob Stollerow and others, and Kohut and others from way back, joining alongside the patient and taking on their experience, but only as if it becomes your own, because it's so not about you. You've decentered from your own subjectivity, your biases, your prejudices, your preconceptions. You join alongside the patient and take on their experience as if it were your own, though it never actually becomes your own. And you'll say something that demonstrates your attunement to and your resonance with that which they are experiencing moment by moment. Okay, emotional resonance is the therapist's exquisite attunement to the patient's internal world, at least as she's expressing it verbally and non-verbally, a holding connection that tenderly acknowledges what is living within the patient, gives it a name, and gently steadies it. It requires a finely tuned sensitivity on the part of the clinician, not only to the patient's affect moment by moment, especially when that affect carries overdetermined intensity or subtle emotional complexity, but also to the narrative with which that affect is intertwined or associated, which is often a deeply embedded limiting belief that is giving the feeling its organizing shape and its relational meaning. And as we shall soon see, this holding is necessary, but not sufficient for deep embodied healing. Oops, okay. Is that right? Okay, good. The provocation. I just happen to love this slide. I don't know, whatever, I love it. So, yeah, provoking, just about to knock the egg off. I'm having a little trouble here. Okay, introduction of the provocation, those disruptive attunement, directing the patient's attention to elsewhere, where the therapist would want the patient to go. So it's not where the patient was, but it's sort of, Les Havens would talk about sort of extending it a little bit and directing them a little bit. You're still attuned, but you're daring to sort of disrupt a little bit the homeostatic balance by directing their attention to, and being willing to sort of tolerate the fact that you'll be disrupting a little bit the homeostasis and being willing to do that. And what will that do to the patient's anxiety? Increase it. Increase it. But you're also doing the holding provocation, support, challenge, anxiety assuaging, anxiety triggering, anxiety assuaging, anxiety triggering, back and forth, back and forth. A provocative attunement that does not preserve momentarily, this is moment by moment, the status quo, but rather perturbs it, disrupts it. So whereas empathic resonance reinforces and affirms, and again, it's not about saying, I think you're right. It's not about I. You decenter from I when you're empathically attuned. Again, a la Bob Stollerow and certainly others. I think we would say also, Dr. Ava will tell me, but a la Paul and Anna Ornstein and Kohut himself and Ernst Wolf and so on. Anyway, whereas empathic resonance reinforces and affirms, provocative resonance unsettles and disrupts. Now, successful only when grounded in homeostatic attunement, disruptive attunement. And again, I would ask all of you to think about how many times have you disruptively attuned, been disruptively attuned and disrupted the homeostatic balance? And I hope there are times that you have. I know that on some level, sort of intuitively, we sort of feel like we should just be always empathically attuned and homeostatically attuned and resonating and so on, and just good. And they, of their own accord, would just get better and so on. And I guess every now and then that happens. But for the most part, and we'll be saying much more about complex, adaptive, chaotic systems that just have a kind of stability, no matter how dysfunctional, we have to do a little perturbing or a little disrupting for there to be any real structural change. That's the truth of it. So think about it over the course of the last week, month. How many times did you dare to create anxiety in your patient with a little bit of disruptive attunement and then homeostatic attunement and then a little disruptive attunement? And again, you're not ever busy bouncing them back and forth. On the other hand, you are doing it some. Okay, successful only when grounded in homeostatic attunement. Disruptive attunement is the therapist's strategic, yes, I said strategic, engagement with the patient's emerging edge, the judicious provision of optimal stress that respectfully challenges. And I think people who know my work know that two of my favorite concepts, well, I have many favorite concepts, but one of them is hopeless, relentless hope. In other words, not all hope is good. And the other is optimal stress. Not all stress is bad. And anyway, so the judicious provision of optimal stress to be distinguished from traumatic stress. Optimal is non-traumatic stress. I think Kohut and plenty of others had defined it as that. Optimal disillusionment is non-traumatic. Anyway, optimal stress that respectfully challenges. It demands exquisite attentiveness on the therapist's part to be able to do the disruptive attunement, not only to the gravitational pull of the familiar, so the old bad, but also to the patient's innate thrust toward health. And I have the feeling from what I have know that the Center for Christianity and Psychoanalysis is very much about appreciating the innate thrust that we all have toward health and towards recovery. It's a vital organizing impulse that longs for integration, balance, and aliveness. Okay, now once the holding is in place and the patient is feeling deeply understood, the therapist will indeed be in a position to offer the patient carefully timed, optimally stressful interventions. Interventions that both challenge and support in the very same sentence. Both provoke and hold, or maybe hold and provoke, but getting them both in, simultaneously disrupting and reinforcing the status quo of the defenses. These interventions will be strategically designed to generate destabilizing, another one of my favorite words, internal dissonance and homeostatic imbalance. I don't know why these aren't advancing automatically. Huh. Okay, maybe I just click there. All right. The therapist, in essence, will be creating anxiety optimizing, a term I've only recently sort of realized I needed to be introducing. Anxiety optimizing. I was taught during my training at the Boston Psychoanalytic, the importance of anxiety and not really staying attuned to the patient's anxiety, but, somewhat intellectually, that I was taught about anxiety. And if there's too much, the person defends. And I sort of like, whatever. But decades later, I came to appreciate that it really is important for us to be keeping our fingers ever on the pulse of the level of the patient's anxiety, and in order to optimize it, which means challenging when you can and supporting when necessary. Challenge, support, challenge, support. So we're talking about anxiety optimizing, growth incentivizing, not even growth promoting, but incentivizing mismatch experiences for the patient by continuously, judiciously, and alternately juxtaposing when you can. Now, let me just say, plenty of times I'm not doing this, but I am usually, the backdrop is usually, I'm really listening and I'm feeling my way into their inner experience, at what they're saying. I'm not trying to think, well, you really have mixed feelings about your mother that you're not talking about. Not that part of their inner experience, but sort of what they're feeling, what they're sort of, what's there, as they present to me in the moment, micro-tracking. And Joan Klagsbrun and some of the others, when they're just kind of micro-tracking, a beautiful job of it. So juxtaposing disruptively attuned challenge of defense with homeostatically attuned support of it. In other words, by combining provocation with holding, these optimally stressful mismatch experiences will gently confront the patient's outdated growth limiting defenses, thereby offering, important two words, corrective challenge to entrenched, implicitly held relational patterns. I mean, you approach it from the outside here, but ultimately challenging, entrenched, neural entrenchment, implicitly held relational patterns. Okay, I love this image. Optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experiences created by juxtaposing challenge of defense with its support. Okay, I love this one too. We're talking about optimally stressful, destabilizing internal tension to incentivize growth. Again, I invite all of you to think about, when have you been doing this? And not just trying really hard to be empathically attuned. And then if there's it's an instance of inaccurate empathy, like, oh my God, and I was trying so hard, and then trying to kind of backpedal a little bit, and so sorry, and let's get back on with the homeostatic attunement. That, yes, and optimally stressful, destabilizing internal tension. Oh dear, that wasn't good. Okay. Okay. As we shall soon see, the Stark method, and please note that I now figured out that I can put the star in the middle of my name. ST star for the ARK. Get it? The Stark method of psychodynamic synergy features five. Now, some of you know, sort of, oh, yeah, there are five models. And some of you are like, huh? Anyway, you'll hear much more about it in a moment, so stay tuned. And you have to get your CE, so you have to stay tuned. Okay, the Stark method of psychodynamic synergy features five corrective challenges. In other words, to create mismatch experiences relevant for all five models. Provocative challenges strategically and artfully designed to incentivize graduated disruption repair, disruption repair, disruption repair, replacement of or easing of old defensive bad into new adaptive good, and to facilitate incremental, it's not done overnight, easing of, I love to put it this way, the entrenched, conditioned reality of what was and therefore now is, for the most part, into the enlivening quantum possibility of what could be. Fundamentally, that's what we want to be doing. So again, now for some of you, it's like, what? So model one, come to find out, will be about new corrective information. It is more cognitive, model one, classical psychoanalysis. Model two is a little bit more about corrective emotional experience, so more like self-psychology. And so a corrective experience, which is the opportunity to grieve at last, long-standing heartbreak, loss, that. Model three, new corrective relationship. This is more the intersubjective perspective of contemporary relational theory. This is now a new corrective relationship. Model four, new corrective beginning. And Michael Balint and Winnicott and them others, new corrective beginning. This is the existential humanistic approach to easing despair and facilitating the patient's overcoming of their surrender to analytic oneness, a la Ofra Eshel. What a beautiful term. Ofra Eshel, Israeli psychoanalyst. And then model five, the quantum neuroscientific approach to neural entrenchment and analysis paralysis, and rooted to the spot and frozen in time, new corrective envisioned possibilities. So it's the introduction of these corrective challenges to the established dysfunctional homeostatic foundation of the defenses. This is a clear, I can never pronounce this word, homage. I think I did that. I always say homage, but I think it's homage. A clear homage to Alexander and French's 1946, groundbreaking at the time, corrective emotional experience. Okay, indeed, optimally stressful, I got to move on here. Growth incentivizing, oh yeah, corrective challenge is at the heart of the working through process. Anxiety calibrated therapeutic interventions that offer enough challenge that there'll be impetus for destabilization, at the same time that they offer enough support that there will be opportunity for restabilization at a more evolved level. No pain, no gain. Or as Boreana would say, and plenty of others would as well, no mud, no lotus. Well, I can't say the name. Anyway, you know the name. It's three words, and I can't pronounce it. Anyway, all right. The wound is the place where the light enters you, Rumi. The wound. Okay. Examples of anxiety-provoking challenge, provocation, juxtaposed with anxiety assuaging support, holding. Here are two easy ones. Conflict statement. So conflict statement, model one, classical psychoanalytic perspective. You know, these always start with you know, magic words, you know that. It's not, I don't answer those kinds of questions. It's, you know that I don't answer those kinds of questions. And by the way, do they know that? They may not like it. Do they know that? Yeah, because you never answer those kinds of questions. And if you do sometimes and then don't, then color you fair, barren, seductive, exciting, but ultimately rejecting. So anyway, so you know that I don't answer those kinds of questions. What is that going to do to their anxiety? Yep. And that if you're ever to get better, ultimately you will need to find your own answers. You know, They don't love it that you said that. Do they kind of know that at this point? I mean, I didn't say this in the first session to them, but that if you're ever to get better, ultimately you could throw in a few conditionals. You will probably need to find your own answers or some of your own answers, right? So increases their anxiety. That's disruptive attunement, provoking. But often the conjunction is but, and now the patient, made anxious, mobilizes a defense. But you find yourself, it doesn't have to be find yourself, but that to me sort of suggests the idea of it comes upon them. You find yourself reacting. You find yourself continuing to wish, even so, that I would simply tell you what to do. And they feel understood, sort of like, exactly, that's exactly right. I do wish that still. And you do know that I don't answer those kinds of questions, but you find yourself continuing to wish that I would. Now, that's about relentless hope, but you're dealing with the patient's internal conflict around what they do know, left brain, but what they defensively, right brain, find themselves wishing even so. Model 2 is about facilitating their grieving. This isn't facilitating specifically their grieving. It's interpreting and getting some stuff named. It's more cognitive. Okay, model 4, transitioning to model 4, the existential humanistic perspective. A part of you is desperate to be seen, known, and understood. But another part, or maybe another part, or just no word at all, another part of you is terrified of being found. So a part of you is desperate to be seen, known, and understood. That could actually either make them feel anxious or actually sort of like, yes, yes. Another part of you terrified of being found. Either they feel good that you know that or sort of like, ooh, yeah, okay. So you're highlighting the conflict they have within them about being in relationship. Okay, I put this in here just so you get a sense of holding holding provocation in all 5 of my models. We'll get back to it later, but I wanted to get this said now. So these are prototyping interventions that I suggest that provide both provocation, disruptive attunement, and holding, homeostatic attunement. So model 1, I just did one. You know that, but find yourself. Okay, you know that increases their anxiety, but you find yourself eases their anxiety. And you can emphasize either one or the other. You're ever busy anxiety calibrating, anxiety optimizing to sort of figure out, and you're paying attention to how it's landing, what you're saying, how it's landing in terms of their anxiety. And I know that certainly I, in my time, trained, at the Boston Psychoanalytic, you just offer those interpretations, by golly. And if the patient doesn't hear it the first time round, then change a few of the words and then say it again. Color us relentlessly hopeful. And so, you feel very good when you've sort of managed to offer like 7 different versions of the same transference interpretation. And you present this to your supervisor who says, very good, very good. That's a good transference interpretation. Eventually, the patient will come around to getting it, the wisdom in what you're saying. So, and there may be wisdom in it, but that might not be the best way. So I know Les Havens used to talk about, he'd gotten his analytic training and it took him some years to sort of get back to being like a real person. Now, I'm not suggesting that analysts are not real people. Believe me, I am a psychoanalyst and I'm very proud of it. But I am now also some other things as well. It's the synergy of things. So, and I do now attend much more to not just cognitive, but also affect, model 2, relational, model 3, existential meaning, model 4, and model 5, possibilities and the future. And not just models 1 to 4, kind of thinking about, we want to make sure we can remember the past so that we don't relive it in the present, which is models 1, 2, 3, 4. It tends to be, we want to make sure we don't repeat the past. So we need to come to know it. Model 5 is a little bit more about leaning into the edge between the present and the future. But again, it's the synergy of all 5. And so over a course of a session, you're busy sort of back and forth. I really shouldn't say seamlessly, just back and forth. And sometimes not very seamlessly at all, but back and forth between amongst these 5 different sort of positions. more in a moment. Conflict statements. Model 2, disillusionment statements, because we want to give them the experience belatedly of grieving all sorts of traumatic relational traumatic relational experiences unmastered, and belatedly we want to give them an opportunity to grieve. So disillusionment statements to facilitate the grieving. And so it's 3 parts. I'll say real quick, like 3 parts. Oh my God, my eyes on the time. All right. You had so hoped. I'm all about the past perfect tense, not you so hoped. That's sort of, when did that happen? Can you hear me when I say you had so hoped? I'm a little bit suggesting that that's back then, and now it's, and not so much. You had so hoped. Here's the second part, the reality of their disillusionment, but are beginning to realize, sort of cognitively, are beginning to realize, third part, the disillusionment, the unbearable truth of things, and it enrages / devastates you. So that's to facilitate their grieving that hasn't ever really been done. Okay, model 3, relational interventions or accountability statements. Nobody's ever asked me the difference. In all of these years, nobody, thank goodness, ever asked me what's the difference between a relational intervention and an accountability statement. And I think the answer is there's no difference. They're just 2 ways to describe the same thing. So anyway, relational interventions. In essence, I'm now understanding, in relation to you, because now we focus in on the here and now of the analytic or therapeutic engagement. Model 1, we're zeroing in on cognitive, what's going on in their brain, neurotic conflict between the unconscious forces pressing yes, and then an ego made anxious, putting a lid on the id, and this internal neurotic structural intrapsychic conflict. So what's going on inside the internal conflict? That's what we're focusing in on. Model 2, we're zeroing in on their heartbreak, their heartbreak, their pain, the disillusionment, the upset, that things were not as they so would have wished they could have been. From relentless hope to acceptance, right? The model 2. Model 3, come to find out, now we're introducing. So model 1 is 1 person. Model 2 is 1.5 person. The half person being the best of who the therapist is, facilitating the grieving. And when you're having a good hair day, maybe it's a 1 3/4 person. And when you're having a bad hair day, it's 1 1/4 person. But the 1 person is the patient's affective experience. And after the initial illusion and it's all good, the inevitable disillusionment, empathic failure, disruption of the positive narcissistic self-object transference, and a grieving. Anyway, that's probably way more than you needed to know, but there you go. Now, but model 3, thank you, David. We're introducing the here and now of the analytic engagement. Okay, again, all 5 are important at different moments in time. Over the course of a session, you may be, and people ask me, do I know when I'm going back and forth? I mean, I who sort of, been working on this system for 50 years, do I know? And sort of like, well, not really. But I think intuitively on some level, I kind of zero in on whether it's a more cognitive thing I want to do or more affectively facilitate the grieving, or more zero in on what the hell's happening in the here and now between us. Model 4, the pain, their despair, their deep existential angst, and so on, and want to help them surrender to, so they can start anew, begin a new beginning, whatever. Or model 5, look ahead to the future, because they're too rooted to the spot and frozen in place. And let's lean into the edge between the present and the future. And a lot of the short-term folks, the AEDP and ISTDP and EMDR and all those initials and ACT and them others, I've learned and actually privately been studying them and learning them on my own. And so like, shit, man, they do a certain something that the more psychoanalytically oriented models 1 to 4, time-honored, psychoanalytically informed, don't really quite do. So model 5 does a certain something, but you don't necessarily get to use model 5 until some other work's been done in models 1, 2, 3, 4, then you do model 5, then you go back, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not, there is no sequencing of finally you get to model 5. That's not it. You're ever busy interdigitating. All right, so model 3, I had to sort of try to describe what a prototypical intervention would be. There's so many things I could say about that, and I should sometime give a talk on simply model 3. I have in the past done that, not recently. I'm now understanding in relation to you what it must have been like for you in relation to your parent. And in model 3, we get to throw ourselves under the bus. It occurs to me that, you're showing me what it must have been like for you in relation to your father, for whom nothing was ever good enough, by replaying that in here with me, something that I guess I've been refusing to see. You throw yourself under the bus in order to get this dynamic that's being reenacted, compulsively, unwittingly reenacted in the space between patient and therapist. More on that another time. You'll have to come back another time to hear about that. Okay, model 4, facilitation statements, lifting obviously from Winnicott, the facilitating environment. This is the one where we encourage them. We want them to regress, to redo. Model 1, oh God forbid, we're not specifically encouraging them to regress. Model 2, facilitating their grieving. Model 3, zeroing in on what's being, doer and done to, Jessica Benjamin, and projective identification and the inevitable inherent messiness a la Ed Tronick, and negotiating at the intimate edge a la Darlene Ehrenberg, and all the William Allenson White folks and the contemporary relational theory, Model 3. Model 4 now, regress to redo, a harmonious interpenetrating mix-up, helping the patient a la Masood Khan overcome their dread of surrender to resourceless dependence or absolute dependence or existential dependence, and then being able eventually to generalize, as Gina had mentioned at the beginning, from the small to the all. So they can experience it in relation to you, where they just finally get to relax and rest and feel totally and completely held. Okay, a part of you yearns to be known. Another part of you is terrified of being found. Picking up on the conflict within them. It's an internal conflict, but it has to do with relationship. Yeah. Okay, good. And quantum disentanglement statements, juxtaposition of the entrenched, conditioned reality of what was, and therefore on some level probably now is, with the enlivening quantum possibility of what could be. Now, it's most dramatically done in model 5, but quite frankly, I think it's relevant for all 5 models, where basically what you're doing is you're introducing the provocation. You're introducing optimally stressful, growth incentivizing corrective challenge to the old bad by introducing new good for deep embodied change. Now, let me say, so somebody said, well, Martha, do you do deep embodied change with all your people? And they're like, well, no, no, not everybody. If the patient is just, it's so egocentric for them. Hello, Gail. It's so egocentric for them that, quite frankly, they don't recognize it as being problematic. I'm not going to like be in their face about changing it if they're not quite yet appreciating that it does, there's a price to be paid for their doing that which they do. So I don't, some patients truly are not interested in deep embodied change, like whatever. So then sort of like, okay, and that's okay too. And so I resonate. I always do my best to be present with where they are. And if where they are is that's where they are, then I'm not going to be in their face about something that they haven't even given me a little hint that they would really like to be able inside of themselves to change. All right, let's see what we have next. Okay, oh good, I'm so glad I brought this slide up to the front. Parenthetically, as we sit with our patients, oh my God, I want to set my clock back so that I'm going to get more time here, but whatever. As we sit with our patients, we will often become aware of tension, not only within them, but within ourselves as well. Dialectical tension between, on the one hand, our vision of who we think the patient could be, were she but adaptively able, willing to make healthier choices. And wait, let me just see. Okay. And on the other hand, our respect for the reality of who she is. Do you hear what I'm saying here? And for the choices, no matter how unhealthy, that she defensively finds herself feeling compelled to make. We are therefore always struggling to find within ourselves an optimal balance between wanting the patient to change. We get to want the patient to change, and therefore sometimes then challenging her, provoking her, and accepting the reality of who she is, and therefore supporting her. In other words, tension within, ourself. That was a last minute addition here. Ourselves, between wanting to provoke and wanting to hold. And I encounter this quite a bit with my patient, whom I'm very fond of, who is very much into child pornography. And you know, anyway, enough said. Like, I mean, there's a part of me that just, you know, like want to beat it out of him, and he's actually kind of doing it. Yeah. Okay. But I mean, kind of a little bit, whatever. And it's how do you position yourself? That's a dramatic one. But when they're doing something that's sort of like, God, it's so self-sabotaging, self-indulgent, libidinal, and self-destructive, aggressive. Net result, so self-sabotaging. And you want to say, but my God, you know, just get a job. Or can't you just get out of the relationship or just marry him for Christ's sake? It's been 25 years. And you find yourself, so there's tension within us. That's okay. We're people, we're human being. And we get to sort of, yeah, we get to be human, come to find out. Who knew? All right, but so let's see. Homeostatic attunement alone. Whatever, moving on. That was a good slide, but let's not worry about it. Okay. Oh, no, it was a good slide. But anyway, so you do all this, whatever, until finally, oh, I was leading up to this. This is one of my favorite slides. At the end of the choreography, the curtain comes down, and there you have it. Anyway, so much for that. I lost my moment, but that's okay. Okay, moving on. We cannot avoid suffering, but we can choose how we cope with it, find meaning in it. We all suffer, and move forward with renewed purpose. Although often misattributed to Viktor Frankl, apparently he's not actually the one who wrote this, but everybody thinks he is. So I'll just put that. Between stimulus and response is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Everybody loves that one. But applying this to the clinical situation, I want to reframe it just a little bit, please. This is fundamental. Between stressor, because my stuff, it's all about stressors, environmental stressors, many of them, most of them relational stresses, but other stresses as well, energetically and internal and so on, physiological, etc. Anyway, between stressor and what follows is a space. In that space is our power, either to react defensively, less healthy, when the stressor is simply too much for us to manage, which will thwart our growth temporarily for the moment. Everything's moment by moment. Or to respond adaptively when we are more easily able to take that stressor in stride, where we can process, integrate, and adapt to it, which will promote our freedom. Not only do we have the power to choose how we make meaning of our lives, but we also have the responsibility to do so. It has been suggested that 10% of what happens to us is life, but 90% is how we defensively react, less healthy, or adaptively respond, more healthy. All right. Okay. I'm not what happened to me. I'm what I choose to become. Carl Jung. Please note that I don't limit defenses to the well-known and more traditional ones, such as repression, projection, dissociation, somatization. Rather, I define defenses more broadly as speaking to any of the self or ego, self-protective mechanisms that we unconsciously mobilize when made anxious. I should add that word unconsciously. Uh, they're initially unconscious, eventually they become more conscious, that we unconsciously or unwittingly mobilize when made anxious in the face of stressors. Either we, made anxious, react to the stressor by reflexively defending, a defensive, mindless reaction, or we, more resilient, respond to the stressor by reflectively adapting, an adaptive, more mindful response. All right, well, this is an overview. Therapeutic modalities, whether long-term or short-term, that have profound and sustained psychodynamic change as their ultimate goal. For example, psychoanalysis and other depth psychologies, ACT, IFS, EMDR, ISTDP, AEDP, EFT, NLP, somatic experiencing, sensory motor psychotherapy, psychomotor psychotherapy, must ultimately be able to transform low-level defense into higher level defense or more evolved adaptation, in the traditional words of psychoanalysis and ego psychology, and psychological rigidity into psychological resilience, in the evocative words of ACT. such that the patient, whatever her starting point, whatever her initial level of functionality, whatever her diagnosis, I'm not really specifically about diagnosis, just she is a certain something that having issues. But the thought being that wherever she starts, that over time she will become ever better able to manage the myriad stressors in her life to which she is being continuously exposed. Okay, and by repeatedly generating optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experiences between old bad and new good. So here we go. This is my all-encompassing description of psychodynamic / psychoanalytic psychotherapy. It affords the patient both impetus, a little stress there, and opportunity, a little easing of stress, albeit belatedly. We do it after the fact, although often in the context of the transference, not always, often. Most efficiently if it's in the context of the transference, but not always is that an option. Affords the patient both impetus and opportunity to master traumatic, oh, I should add the word relational. Oh my goodness. I've only gone over these slides about 35 times, but all right, to master traumatic relational experiences that had once been overwhelming and therefore defended against, but that can now be revisited. This is the therapeutic process, the working through process. Revisited, reprocessed, grieved, and recontextualized such that growth impeding old bad rigid defenses, once necessary for survival. I mean, in that sense, they're adaptive, but they're rigid, they're disempowering, they're old bad, they're distorting of reality, for the here and now anyway, can be incrementally transformed into growth promoting, new good, resilient adaptations. Indeed, from rigidity to resilience and stronger at the broken places, defense becoming adaptation. As stressors once traumatic, this sentence is so important. As stressors once traumatic are reworked and rendered more optimal. The Beatles had it. They had it. Take a sad song and make it better. So you got whatever, or what a lot of the folks, the short-term intensive folks, they say it's sort of their every problem holds elements of the solution. So, who knew? Well, they knew, and now I know, and the Beatles knew. Let's see, both simple and profound is this compelling idea that psychodynamic psychotherapy has the power, this is what we're doing, to reconfigure, and not all patients want this, but for those who do, has the power to reconfigure the past and thereby to transform the future as rigidity evolves into more resilience. In essence, psychodynamic psychotherapy is a story about reshaping the past to make new futures possible, to unlock new futures in the strange and counterintuitive world of quantum physics. And this is where I always have to say, no, I don't understand quantum mechanics, but I understand a little bit of it. This riveting idea that the present has the power to rewrite the past and thereby to change the future is referred to as retrocausation. That's what we're doing. Parenthetically, transformation of traumatic stressor, to which the patient reacts with a defense, into optimal stressor, to which the patient responds with an adaptation, which is at the heart of the therapeutic action, is a powerful demonstration of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, the quantum fact that uncertainty is built into reality itself. So some stressor that had happened back then is not necessarily traumatic stressor. It can be reworked and reframed, and it becomes an optimal stressor. So instead of there having been a defensive reaction, a defense, now there can be an adaptive response. I mean, my God. All right, moving on here. the moment of transformation exists as potential until the choice is made. We do have choices to reframe once traumatic growth impeding stressors as now optimal growth promoting challenges. All right, a few more. Moving on. Greg Braden's The Divine Matrix, or I think that's the name of his book. It's over there. Quantum science suggests the existence of many possible futures for each moment of our lives. I just love that. Each future lies in a state of rest until it is awakened by choices made in the present. Oh, my God. A bottle of water can be $1 at a supermarket, $3 at the gym, $5 at the movies, $6 on a plane. Same water. The only thing that changed its value was the place. So, too, as a result of deep psychotherapy, what had once threatened to break you can become the very source of your strength. I mean, is that so cool or what? Traumatic stressor is rendered an optimal stressor. And what had once been a defense needed to survive can now be an adaptation that enables you to thrive, from surviving to thriving. Oh, my God. Be still, my beating heart. All right. All right, let's see what we have here. All right, now I'm going to this was fun and this was good, but I'll just read the first sentence and move through it because I want to get to some more stuff. Open, self-organizing, complex, adaptive, chaotic systems resist perturbation, said Charles Krebs up here in Cambridge. Examples of chaotic systems include, I just wanted to kind of get to this, road traffic, the stock market, certainly the self-protective mechanisms mobilized by anxious patients, and hurricanes. Just saying, September and October are hurricane season down in Clearwater Beach. But hey, all right. So anyway, that is so self-organization is synonymous, which is what our defensive structures are. It is synonymous not with health, but with stability. Okay. All right, let's see. Okay, I'll go through this real quick. A classic example of innate inertia and resistance to change, and this is courtesy of Saturday Night Live. Two guys are sitting around a campfire, just chilling, when one turns to the other and says, "You know how when you stick a poker in the fire and leave it in for a long time, it gets really, really hot, and then you stick it in your eye and it really, really hurts? I hate it when that when that happens. I just hate it when that happens. Well, quite frankly, some of our patients, no offense to our patients, and some of us, we also have been patients either now or in our time. That would be our refrain, our refrain as well. Or consider the rock song by the late Warren Zevon titled, "If You Won't Leave Me, I'll Find Somebody Who Will." This song captures a universal truth about our deep-seated need to recreate, in the words of Stephen Mitchell, the familial and therefore familiar. Because that is all we have ever known. The prospect of having something different, this is so important to understand. And this is why negative transference keeps kicking in, because that's the only thing. Negative transference, though, can make you a little anxious when you think your therapist is being critical. There's also a way in which sort of, I knew it. I knew it. And meanwhile, of course, the therapist is sitting there thinking, there's not an ounce of truth in that. I'm so not critical. Or maybe there is an ounce of truth in it, but let's say there isn't. And yet the patient keeps thinking you're critical because their investment in it is the prospect of having something different, i.e. somebody who's not critical, would trigger anxiety. Why? Precisely because it would force us to confront a profound realization that things could be and could therefore have been different. That is such a big statement. And patients don't really, I mean, all of us are like, oh my God, you mean my parent didn't have to, whatever. Like, I thought that's sort of my loyalty, to the infantile object. I sort of thought, I sort of thought that's the way it had to be. It's like, no. So if you get it, that it could be different, that means things could have been different. And that means you have to confront and grieve the reality that the way they were was not a good thing. So more generally, the repetition compulsion then, as we know, has unhealthy and healthy components. And let me say one thing that I've learned. I'd like to say I've known it all along. I haven't. I've learned it only really more recently, that there's an upside and a downside to everything. If people could actually mute themselves, that would be good. Thank you. Wow, I got somebody quite activated there. But anyway, so there's an upside and a downside. Thank you, Paul. There's an upside and a downside to everything. I mean, I don't know, maybe the child pornography stuff, I'm not sure what the upside is, but whatever. But for the most part, upside and a downside to everything. And so the repetition compulsion, there's an upside and a downside. The downside, the unhealthy component, has to do with the patient's need to have more of same, no matter how dysfunctional, because that's all the patient has ever known. Having something different would create anxiety because it would highlight the fact that things could be and could therefore have been different. I'm repeating myself there. But the healthy piece has to do with the patient's need to achieve belated mastery of the parent's failures. Beautiful. Oh, okay. I just have to read this, and then I'm going to skip through some because I'm kind of trying to pace myself here. I'm here reminded of Portia Nelson's autobiography in 5 short chapters, which highlights both our defensive need to maintain things as they are and our adaptive capacity ultimately to embrace change. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. I mean, like, is that like priceless? I mean, really. Okay, well, we're just going to move on. That was a good slide, but whatever. Okay, let me just see. Oof. Oh, okay. Well, so much for the sandpile model chaos theory, but I just love that image. Iterative cycles of defensive collapse and adaptive reconstitution at ever higher levels of complexity and dynamic balance. A compelling visual for the cumulative impact over time of optimal stress on both body and mind. I guess we're just going to, oof. Ah, this is painful for me to go through these like this. Without order, nothing can exist, said Oscar Wilde. Without chaos, nothing can evolve. Oh dear, okay. Well, okay, which is why that sandpile model, the well-known adage, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. That's beautiful, and we love that. Although inspirational, it does not do full justice by evolutionary processes, which is what we're talking about. The working through process in psychodynamic psychotherapy is an evolutionary process. Probably more appropriate would be fall down 7 times, work it through. Stand up ever more triumphantly 8. Okay. Okay, in honor of optimal stress. Oh, good. Okay, then I'm pretty much on time here. Uh, is there not a certain beauty in brokenness? This is for all of us. I wrote this from my heart. A beauty never achieved by things unbroken. If a bone is fractured and then heals, the area of the break will tend to be stronger than the surrounding bone and will not again easily fracture. Are we too not stronger at our broken places? And do we too not acquire an enduring strength from surviving adversity and hardship and mastering the experience of disappointment, heartbreak, and devastation? And then when we finally rise above it, do we not rise up in quiet triumph? Even if only we notice. I hope that resonates for most of you. Does for me. Okay, and this one, the one people know I love this. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I don't know, that's beautiful. I don't know, I found that online somewhere, but if that isn't priceless. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's beautiful. I mean, it seems like that's real, but maybe that just AI made that. In any event, well done, AI. Okay, here we go. The START method. All right, so I'm going to pace myself, go through this real quick. Like the STAR, notice the START method, an integrative approach, one that involves the complex interplay of these 5 models. They're interdependent, none more important than any of the others. They all operate with just the right combination of challenge and support, provocation and holding, dosed stimulation, as some have described it. Oh, good. I hope David will come back to generate ongoing healing cycles of disruption and repair and eventual advancement of the patient from old bad, disempowering, up, he's back, and distorted narratives to new good, more empowering, and more reality-based narratives. Variously described as core beliefs, emotional learnings, Bruce Ecker talks about emotional learnings, mental schemas, relational expectations. Larry Hedges talks about those, and the implicit relational knowing of Carlin Lyons Ruth. Different ways to describe that. All right, so these are some just to kind of get you into the feel of it before I've told you a whole lot about these different modes. Here we go. So I wanted to choose a couple sentences to capture the essence. So model 1, the interpretive perspective, cognitive interpretive perspective, one person of classical psychoanalysis. And the order of these is when I became familiar with them. So this is for the 1970s. That's when I was exposed to it, the Boston Psychoanalytic, right? Do the math, decade, then you know exactly how old I am. All right. Where it was, there shall ego be. Freud said that. My rendering, tame the id and strengthen the ego. And I was pleased, I'll just throw this in as an aside, I was thinking that Freud had actually said that, but he didn't actually say it that way. So I went online and checked who else would say tame the id and strengthen the ego. And I found one other person who talked about it in that very same way. I was delighted, tame the id and strengthen the ego. So I'm like reading along, and it's by some psychiatrist somewhere. And I realized, like, oh my God, 19 paragraphs of direct plagiarism of my writing, copyrighted writing by somebody. Anyway, that he claimed was his and was published in a prestigious online magazine. Anyway, he and I have actually become friends. He didn't really do me harm, but anyway, it's a complicated story, but it is what it is. So I guess I'm the only one who says tame the id and strengthen the ego, but I like that idea. Tame the id, strengthen the ego. Okay, model 2, the deficiency compensation or corrective provision perspective of self-psychology. Elvin Semrad, pretending that it can be when it can't is how people break their hearts. Relentless hope. Many have said this. Grieving is nature's way of healing a broken heart. Now, I had one patient who said to me, I was not allowed to use the word grieving. So, you know, I figured out some ways around that. So that I did try indeed to get her grieving a little bit. I just didn't call it grieving. I didn't even say mourning, but we helped her to confront and ultimately to make her peace with some painful, disillusioning, unbearable truths, and ultimately to evolve from relentless hope to sober, mature acceptance that it was what it was and is what it is. All right, so grieving is nature's way. So model 2 is about grieving and facilitating it. Model 1 is about interpreting to tame the id, strengthen the ego. Model 2 is about grieving, so that lifelong heartbreak and so on. Model 3, the intersubjective, 2 authentic subjects, the 2 relational objects, the intersubjective perspective of contemporary relational theory. And whereas the 80s is when I learned the self-psychology, the 90s is the contemporary relational theory stuff. And negotiating, and I used to a long time ago, but I used to sit next to Darlene Ehrenberg at some of the conferences, psychoanalytic conferences at the Waldorf Astoria. And I discovered she who writes about the intimate edge, bless your soul, Darlene. Anyway, and she was taking notes, and I realized that she was doing it in Greg shorthand. And I happen to know Greg shorthand. So then I was writing notes to her. I wrote her a note. I didn't know it as well as she did, but I wrote her a note in Greg shorthand. It's like, oh my God, who knows Greg shorthand? But anyway, so she knows Greg shorthand. I don't mean to out her, but she knows Greg shorthand, as do I. Anyway, negotiating, Model 3, the projective identifications. Model 3 is about projective identification. Model 1 is more about projection and displacement, but it's a one person. It just involves what's going on in the person's head. Model 3 is about what's actually being played out in the therapeutic space. Negotiating the projective identifications, co-creation of things, and inherent messiness, Edtronic, thank you, that will inevitably emerge at the Darlene Ehrenberg intimate edge of authentic relatedness. The hallmark, this is mine, of a successful projective identification at the end of the day is the therapist's capacity to tolerate what the patient finds intolerable. The need, Patrick Casement, the need to be failed. His words here, beautiful. The need to be failed, upside and downside to this need, in ways specifically determined by the patient's developmental history. And so that there can be an opportunity for belated mastery. I go on to add internally recorded and structuralized in the form of pairs of internal bad objects, or Bill Meissner, he was one of my mentors, would talk about introjective configurations or introjective constellations, these two charged toxic boluses, victimizer, victim, doer, done to, in the words of Jessica Benjamin, pairs of internal bad objects, criticizer, criticizee, abuser, abusee, abandoner, abandonee, that then become the filters through which the patient experiences self, others, and the world. Okay, doer and done to, mutual recognition, beautiful words there of Jessica Benjamin. Okay, Model 4, an existential humanistic approach. I always thank Gina Kwan for this because she helped me with this. To accessing the private self, easing loneliness, and finding meaning in despair. There's an upside and a downside to despair. And this beautiful Simon and Garfunkel song, a rock feels no pain and an island never cries. Or Winnicott's, it is a joy to be hidden, but a disaster not to be found. Or Donald Burnham's, the need-fear dilemma about even being in relationship, kind of the schizoid dilemma or schizophrenic, or whatever, but Donald Burnham there down in Maryland. Paralyzing coexistence of intense longing and abject terror. Like, really get it that this is what in Model 4, in those moments when they're terrified of being found, even though they're yearning and longing to be understood. So they want so much to be understood, and so they tell you these things, but they mumble it and they leave out words so that, quite frankly, you can't quite understand it. So they're so conflicted about whether or not they want to be found. They do and they don't. So in Model 1, neurotically conflicted, can I be bad or must I be good? Can I defy or must I comply? Defiance versus compliance, Model 1, an internal neurotic conflict between the id and the superego saying, no, 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 thou shalt not, and the poor ego caught in the middle. Model 4, the conflict, it's an internal one, but it's about being in relationship. The yearning and longing to be known and seen and understood, and a terror of being found. That's the conflict. All right, let's see. A schizoid defense of affective non-relatedness, Arnaud Model, his concept there, another one of my mentors. A heart shattered, that was the name of something I wrote. That was the that was the subtitle for a book I wrote, now that I think about it. A heart shattered, a life unlived, and a stance of self-protective isolation. And again, my email address, that's free, that's free ebook, Martha Stark MD at synergymed.solutions, and it's in the chat. I know they put it in the chat. Okay, and then finally, Model's concept of illusions of grandiose self-sufficiency. Okay, Model 5, moving on here. A quantum neuroscientific approach to completing the trauma and liberating latent potential. Bessel van der Kolk, the body remembers even when the patient does not. The idea of processing, completing, and integrating traumatic embodied memories. Marway helped me to understand how to put it like that. Thank you, Mar. Juxtaposing repeatedly, joltingly, unexpectedly, dramatically, the reactivated memory of old bad with the envisioned possibility of new good. Moving along here, pay attention to old bad by mindfully focusing on the present moment. So people do the mindfulness and the meditating. You're paying attention to old bad by mindfully focusing on the present moment, and then setting intention for new good by leaning into the edge between present and future. And you can see how we're talking about juxtaposition, optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experiences, therapeutic memory reconsolidation in essence. Together, patient and therapist co-create the patient's envisioned future and possible self, working in concert to imagine alternative, compellingly better emergent possibilities for the patient. All right, moving on. Well, I've kind of said this. Model 1, privileges. I know that's a big fancy word, but I like that word. Cognitive privileges thinking. Model 2, privileges feeling. That's affective. Model 3, privileges enactments, or it's really mostly reenactments of early on unmastered relational traumas. Most of them are reenactments, although we always talk about it as enactments. So I'll say enactments, but it's kind of reenactments. So it's relational, CAR, notice this, CARES is what I'm getting to. Model 4, privileges the search for meaning. From nihilistic rejection of existence to existential acceptance of life's dualities, polarities, complementarities, uncertainties, paradoxes. I just love saying that sentence. But model 4 is about the despair for those who feel it. Not everybody feels despair. Some of them are drug addicts and they don't feel it. No, some of them just don't feel it. But for those who do feel despair, I mean, on the other side of despair is lightness and joy. The dark side and the light side, yin yang kind of thing. So existential, privileges the search for meaning, and model 5, synaptic, CARES, privileges traumatic embodied memories and deeply entrenched narratives. And or we could think of superpositional, which picks up on the quantum piece, the simultaneous existence of multiple possible states. And actually, Christine Amos suggested shape shifting as being sort of what model 5 does, sort of like, I like that. That works for me, shape shifting. So this whole method is CARES, a CARES approach. And when I develop, it's not yet, I have 5 more years to do it. I have a decade to develop each of my models. The 6th model is going to be somatic hyphen spiritual approach. And people say, oh, I want it now. It's sort of like, well, I'm not, one, I'm not evolved enough to do it yet. And secondly, I don't know, I have 5 more years until 2030. But then it'll be caress. It'll be a caress approach to deep embodied healing. That kind of works, right? Okay. Okay, well, let me just see. Okay. I guess I'll say this real quick. Model 1, structural conflict. For those of us who are long in the tooth, neurotic conflictedness. Again, I don't tend to go by diagnosis, but everybody's like, oh, what's the diagnosis? All right. Patients with neurotic features, the neurotic. Of course, they're not just the neurotic, but neurotic features. Self-psychological structural deficit or self-deficit. The narcissist, narcissistic vulnerability, narcissistic woundedness. Model 3, relational conflict. Stephen Mitchell's term. Noxious relatedness. Notice the N words, neurotic conflictedness, narcissistic vulnerability, noxious. Relatedness. Good, the N word. This is the character disorder, the borderline. In those moments when the patient is acting that way, in the relationship here with you. Model 4, existential humanistic, relational deficit. Again, thanks to Larry Hedges. He made me do a model 4. He was the only one who knew my work well enough to know what was missing. And he said, Martha, you have to do model 4. So I fought rigidly for some time. No, I've got my 3 modes. And so on. He said, no, you have to do the 4th. So anyway, I did the 4th. And of course, my model is so much better because I added the 4th. So much for from rigidity to resilience. And lo and behold, now we can go structural conflict, structural deficit, relational conflict, relational deficit. I mean, if that isn't incredible, tell me, please. And so the 90s for relational conflict, and then that decade from 2000 to 2010 was, when Larry Hedges was in my face about it, and I put in relational deficit, and I feel I have to go back to all my previous patients and apologize that I hadn't fully appreciated it. It's also sort of like I do a lot of dancing. West Coast swing is my dance. It's the dance, the state dance in California. And I have this wonderful teacher, and he's taught me all sorts of wonderful, good things. But I now know how to spin in a way, sort of with the head, and get the head doing its thing. And I didn't used to know how to do that. So there too, I feel I have to go back and apologize to all my previous dance partners over the course of the decades that I was probably throwing them off when I was turning, because I was throwing them off balance when I was like jigging my head around. But anyway, they still dance with me, so I guess it's not too bad. All right, so now in Model 4, we have the schizoid, we have the addict. It's a very private thing. Addictions, very private thing. The outlier, like neurodivergence. And again, people have all of these aspects. It's just in the moment what you're focused on. And then finally, analysis paralysis, neural entrenchment, non-action. Individuals who are in a state of paralysis tethered to their traumatic past. All right, that's it. Moving on. So the agent, I've almost said this, but Model 1, it's interpreting, cognitive. Model 2, it's grieving, creating a safe space for them to grieve. Model 3 is negotiating at the intimate edge. Model 4 is surrendering, helping them to regress, to redo. So there can be the emergence of analytic oneness, existential humanistic. And then Model 5 is I couldn't decide which of these three words I like the best, so I put in all three. Disentangling, rescripting, and updating the narratives. Okay. It's important, but whatever. Oh, don't worry about it. Well, I have to say it. So Model 1 is from resistance to awareness. Model 2 from relentless hope to acceptance. Model 3, and this is by way of providing holding provocation, homeostatic attunement, disruptive attunement. I'm going to get to some more examples in a moment. That's why I'm rushing. Model 3, reenactment to accountability. And in accountability is empowerment. People will say, well, doesn't it seem like you're blaming them? You do it carefully, do it thoughtfully, but basically, in accountability is they're getting it, that they now have choices. If they hold themselves accountable for what's not going right for them in their relationships, they can opt then, between the stimulus and the response, there's space. They can opt then to do things a little differently going forward. There's empowerment. From retreat to accessibility and awakened aliveness, Model 4, and from refractory inertia, to actualizing action. Intentioned, purposeful action, and the envisioned becoming of what was once unimaginable. Okay, good. I always have to tell people, I bought this from Shutterstock, and I paid $35. Synergy, and I love it. It's not even available anymore. I'm glad I have it. All right, so here. So the therapeutic choreography. First, the holding, which begins with the homeostatic attunement and is expressed in the form of empathic statements. We're going to be talking about empathic statements that effectively support the status quo of the patient's defenses by resonating empathically with the patient's need for them. We understand their need to retreat, their need to be continuing to hope. Not that we're saying, I'm glad you do that. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. We decenter from I, and we understand their need to be defending in the ways that they do. If they're abusive to their partner, if they cling still to their mommy, if they retreat whenever they blah, 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 that we come to understand their need to be the way they are. That is so huge. Anyway. Indeed, the patient will come to feel deeply held and profoundly understood. And they'll feel that way because you do understand why they have trouble coming every week. You do understand why they need, for now, we put in the conditional things, for now at this point in time, to come every other week. We are naming it, we're understanding. That's the holding. That's not the only thing we're going to do, but that is certainly a critically important part of what we will do. It's necessary, but not sufficient, but it is necessary. The therapist's steady empathic attunement to the patient's affect and its intertwined narrative will provide the necessary foundation. This is the holding for the deeper structural work that will then become possible. Next, the provocation. Once the holding is in place, disruptive attunement can be introduced in the form of these optimally stressful interventions created by juxtaposing challenge of defense, supportive defense, disruptive attunement, homeostatic attunement, provocation, holding, boop, 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 boop. The working through and resolution of these growth incentivizing, anxiety optimizing, mismatch experiences will constitute the therapeutic action. Okay, the holding. And not that we necessarily are physically holding our patients, but metaphorically. I couldn't find an image that highlighted metaphorically. Okay, empathic statements. Let me are my default mode and where I spend much of my time. And they're not specifically about any of my 5 models. It used to be that even I thought that model 4 was about empathic statements. And I've since come to understand the backdrop is the holding for all 5. And empathic statements are an important part of creating that foundation, the necessary but not sufficient for there to be deep structural change. These empathic statements tease out and bring into focus. And in my spot supervision sessions, I try to demonstrate, and I have some more good slides here about that, try to demonstrate how we can tease out and bring into focus both the patient's affect and the narrative with which that affect is associated. So we don't just say the heartbreak, just heartbreak. Now, that's not a bad thing, but heartbreak. We can say that, but you could also say heartbreak when people just so don't understand. There's the narrative. And you don't have to. Maybe all you can get to is heartbreak. But adding the narrative that accompanies the affect is a very efficient way to get stuff done and helps to advance, to go deeper, to advance the analytic and for there to be more moments of meeting and more solid foundation. Formulating these empathic statements requires of the therapist that she be grounded in her body, emotionally resonating, and continuously attuned to, in the words of Robert Melman, the locus of the patient's narcissism. In other words, what matters to the patient. Narcissism meaning sometimes healthy, sometimes not so healthy. It doesn't matter, but just what matters most to the patient in the moment. Not what matters to us, but what matters most. This is empathic stuff. This is a homeostatic attunement. And we also have the option to direct their attention to elsewhere. We get to do that. And again, Les Havens taught me about that and other people too. Okay, let me just move on. And nice image there. Oh, this is good stuff. So a vicarious introspection, right, Kohut, and so on. It involves the therapist's sustained empathic immersion in the patient's inner world as it is being lived from the outside, from the inside out. Excuse me. Okay, moving on. These empathic statements are experienced near, not experienced distant. What resides in the patient's consciousness, not her unconscious. And so many times, you know, when the case is being presented, people will want to say, well, I think the patient is really feeling angry that you're away on your vacation. Well, maybe the patient is, but that's not what they're aware of. So with the empathic statement, when we're doing the holding, and trying to establish this solid foundation, necessary but not sufficient for deep structural change, we're just going to be resonating with what's experienced near, what's in their consciousness or just about in their consciousness. It does not directly access the unconscious, but it facilitates awareness awareness at sometimes at the preconscious level, just beneath the surface, often serving as a bridge to deeper unconscious content. But again, we can't be too focused on, I want to get to that they're really angry that I'm going to be away. The aim of empathic statements is, the aim of the holding, as opposed to the provocation, is to help the patient feel understood. Not, and Amy, I know Amy had enjoyed my saying that, Amy Reese, to feel understood, not to help the patient understand, but to help the patient feel understood. But in helping her feel deeply known, these statements begin to give shape to the filters through which the patient interprets her world. Okay. Examples of empathic statements. Whew, I finally got there. It's hard to know where to begin when everything feels so overwhelming. It's uncomfortable. So they start with it's. Not, I wonder if it's hard to know where to begin. I wonder if, who cares about you? I had a patient who told me I was not allowed to use the word I. So, okay. I mean, there did come a time some years later when she said, well, you can use the word I now. I said, okay, good to know. I wasn't even allowed to say, I wonder if, so forget about you. This isn't about you. It's about me. Okay. So it's hard to know where to begin when everything feels so overwhelming. That's an affect, hard to know. Doesn't have to be a big loud thing like upset, anger, rage, heartbreak. It could be something like hard to know. And if you understand and get it, that it's hard for them to know, yeah, it's hard. They're glad you understand that. It's uncomfortable to be here when you're not sure the therapy is really helping anyway. See, and I was taught, let there be silences and let the patient suffer. Eventually, they will produce what needs to be said. I couldn't quite do that. I mean, I'm sure I did that a bit, but, or I told my supervisor I'd done that. But I think I probably did actually help them out a little bit. I haven't always felt that just making them tormented in that way is the route to go. So you can say it's uncomfortable to be here, and you know them well enough to know when you're not sure the therapy is really helping anyway. And sort of like, yep, and they feel understood. That's exactly right. And you're allowed to say that. You're allowed to reference the fact that they're not sure the therapy is really helping anyway. You're terrified of being disappointed yet again. You've been hurt too many times already. And you feel it comes right out of you. It's upsetting to be feeling this out of control. Like you get that. And you're not intellectually sort of like, well, when you feel out of control, that's hard for you. That's too, no, so I guess I want to say that with these empathic, homeostatically attuned holding things, you feel it. It's upsetting. It's upsetting. And you feel it with them. It's upsetting to be feeling there's a narrative, this out of control. You're confused about how best to use your session. You're tired of thinking about whether you should stay or go, whether it's in the therapy or in the relationship with the partner. You have such deep despair about ever being able to find a true soulmate. You worry about what I might be thinking. Each of these statements offers a moment of attuned companionship, naming both the feeling and the meaning behind it, such that the patient feels held, less alone, and more seen in the moment. Okay, here. Okay. Contrasting approaches to a moment of affective shift. And I wanted to put this in here. Let us imagine the following hypothetical clinical moment. This first part's hypothetical. As the patient speaks about how profoundly misunderstood she has always felt by her mother, the therapist observes that the patient's breathing becomes more rapid. So, an AEDP approach, and I listened to this with the incredible Diana Fosha, the founder of it. So, an accelerated experiential dynamic psychotherapy approach, as described by its founder, Diana Fosha, in a podcast interview, where basically it was this kind of thing where the patient's breathing becomes more rapid. She would have handled it as follows, and I wrote down word for word. Oh, with my shorthand, my great shorthand, I wrote it word for word. There you go. Darlene Ehrenberg could have written it word for word as well. Here we go. Followed by questions such as, were you aware of that? Oh, I'm sorry. Might offer, I noticed that your breathing quickened just now. I mean, it certainly gets in the embodied piece. And it's true. I know, and it's relevant. I noticed that your breathing quickened just now. Followed by questions such as, were you aware of that? Should we perhaps look at that? What's it like for you to be talking about this? What's coming up for you as you talk about this? Can we just be with it for a little while? And I mean, those are lovely things to say. I mean, this is Diana Fosha. I mean, my God, she has followers around the world. And it zeroes in on the quickened breathing and gets to some interesting good stuff for sure. But it's a little different from what I would be suggesting when there's a moment of affective shift. So alternatively, an empathic approach, my own default mode, might offer the patient something like, it hurts so much to remember all the times your mother broke your heart, followed by statements such as, the pain goes so deep. It's devastating to think about how unavailable your mother always was. Again, as talking about the mother, the breathing quickens. So I attune to the fact of that and come up with these. It's devastating to think about how unavailable your mother always was. There is such aloneness in this memory. It's so painful to remember how unseen and unheard you felt by the one person you most needed. You've carried this heartbreak for such a long time now. It hurts inside when you think about how often your mother misunderstood. The sorrow of never having felt known by her, it's almost unbearable. You so needed her to understand you, and she simply didn't. This grief feels endless because it was never met. There's such longing here and such deep disappointment. Here, the therapist does not explicitly name, oh, I noticed your breathing quickened. Instead, though, she uses her awareness of that somatic shift to inform a gently attuned empathic statement. It's a different way of doing it, one that gives voice to the deeper emotional truth and softly illuminates the pain of the mother's failure to attune. Okay. Okay, more generally, I take my cues from the patient and am therefore generally one step behind her, not ahead. And I liken this to West Coast swing, where there's a leader and a follower. And the follower is one step behind the leader. And I think that we as therapists are often, unless we're doing our disruptive attunement, we're one step behind the patient. Listening always with compassion and never judgment, with both head and heart, to everything the patient is telling me, no matter how seemingly irrelevant it might appear to be. No detail too trivial to be ignored or forgotten. And also one thing that I've learned to do over the years, I now probably do it a little too much, but if the patient is just sort of doing a rapid whatever, interrupt them, say, wait. I want to make sure I get that. And you stop them because they're just one of their ways of defending might be to sort of talk real fast over it. And so wait. And then slow them down and say, so therefore, and then I want to understand the feeling of that no one seemed really to appreciate just how much effort you had put into getting it right. And my statements often end with an ellipsis, and an implied question mark, highlighting that I'm very willing and eager to have my thing edited or modified in some way. So I offer empathic statements that highlight what the patient is actually feeling and about what. Oh dear, let's see. So again, the affect doesn't need to be a big dramatic emotion, anger, outrage, disgust, horror. It can be something quieter, more understated, confused, not knowing for sure, lost, would rather not, would wish, uncomfortable, weary, burdened. Okay, well, that's important, but let's not worry about it. So empathic statements that highlight what the patient is experiencing in a specific context can then often be gently generalized from the small to the all. It's painful to be feeling always so misunderstood. That from it's painful to be feeling so misunderstood by Juanita. It's painful to be feeling always so misunderstood. Or you can highlight what the patient, by the same token, statements that highlight what the patient is experiencing in the present can be softly extended into the past. It is painful to have been feeling so misunderstood for so long now. And you don't say, oh, by the way, is that what you felt in relation to your mother? Huh? So you work with, it's painful to be feeling so misunderstood by Juanita. They said that. Painful. It's painful to be feeling always so. It has been painful to be feeling always so misunderstood. That probably should be it has been. Painful to be feeling always so misunderstood. And then it is painful, or it was painful well, it is painful to have been feeling so misunderstood for so long now. And then they may actually, interestingly, although we can't be intent upon getting them to admit it, they may say, well, yeah, I guess I feel my mother never truly understood. Okay, let me see. Oh, here's some. So with respect to the framing of an empathic statement, please, rather than, I wonder if it's painful to be feeling so misunderstood, or I can see how painful it is to be feeling so misunderstood, or it sounds as if it's painful to be feeling so misunderstood, or it seems as if it is painful to be feeling so understood, or even it must be painful to be feeling so misunderstood. You could simply say it is painful to be feeling so misunderstood. And sometimes people will say, well, I don't want to presume. Well, if you're really tracking them and following word for word, and you say it in a way with a dot, 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 question mark, dot, dot, dot at the end, so you don't state it as a pronouncement. It is painful to be feeling so misunderstood, but you're like straining to make sure you get it. And I look my head to the side. Of course, now a lot of my sessions are by phone, but I used to, for decades, did it in person, face to face, and so on. It is painful. I may even just say not it is, but painful to be feeling so misunderstood. And I mean, they could say, no, it isn't. I mean, in which case it's an instance of inaccurate empathy. I tried, but as it turns out, I didn't get it quite right. Now, in my training, I would have been taught more to say, oh, well, what's it like for you that I got it wrong? I don't really do that anymore. And I just sort of try to get it right. And I'll say, sorry, I don't have that right. I don't have that right. And then they will often sort of help you out, sort of like, well, it's not really that I feel helpless. It's a little more that I feel powerless. And I don't say, although inside I might be thinking, aren't helpless and powerless about the same? I don't. I'm just with them. I'm with them. I'll say, so not so much helpless, more powerless. And then they'll probably go on to explain more why it matters to them that it's the word powerless and not helpless. Um, um, I do my best to eliminate extra words at the beginning of a statement so that I can cut right to the chase. Extra words risk placing too much distance between you and the patient. Furthermore, empathic interventions should be about the patient, not about you. Not about, well, it seems to me that it sounds as if, okay. No, dear. Oh. Empathic interventions are designed to highlight both the patient's affect and the narrative with which that affect is associated. They gently tease out and bring into focus some of the defensive and less healthy recurring themes, habitual patterns, and conditioned repetitions in the patient's life. In essence, these associated narratives that are intertwined with the affect are making explicit and giving shape to the stories, the narratives, the limiting beliefs that the patient as a young child had constructed in a desperate attempt to make meaning of her world. The relational deprivation and neglect, to which I refer as absence of good, errors of omission, and the relational trauma and abuse, to which I refer as presence of bad, errors of commission. And so model 2, by the way, corrective provision, deficiency compensation perspective of self-psychology with its structural or self-defects or deficits, is about absence of good, the good that wasn't. Whereas model 3, which has to do more with the defensive introjection of charged toxic boluses based on early on unmastered relational trauma, the internal record being these charged toxic boluses, this is more presence of bad. People have both, but just in the moment you might be focused in more on presence of bad and how that's being compulsively and unwittingly reenacted on the stage of their life, model 3, or in the moment, how their impaired capacity to be a good mother, self-soothing unto themselves, model 2, self-deficit and impaired capacity to regulate their own self-esteem, model 2. So depending upon in the moment, moment by moment, what is in the forefront, what is the locus of their narcissism, what most matters to them, whether it's healthy or unhealthy or whatever, what matters to them, I let the patient lead me. And then every now and then I throw in, that's the provocation, I throw in some kind of disruptive attunement. All right, let's see, moving on. Okay. Okay, all right. Well, don't worry about that. Okay, the elaborated paragraph. Let me just say, people will hear me talking about the elaborated paragraph. I've sort of evolved into that. It's a powerful tool in our armamentarium, and it helps to establish and stabilize the holding. Um, uh, uh, Robert Mellman introduced the concept of a narcissistic alliance. Unfortunately, he was one of the several people in Boston who didn't do a lot of writing. Paul Russell, Robert Mellman, Elvin Semrad, George Fishman. Heartbreakingly, they didn't do a lot of writing, which is heartbreaking. But anyway, Robert Mellman presented a paper back in 1976, 50 years ago, and I had the privilege and pleasure of being there, hearing it at the Boston Psychoanalytic, and he introduced the concept of a narcissistic alliance. He didn't necessarily describe it exactly this way, but basically he used it to describe the profound relational resonance that emerges in the therapeutic relationship when, as a result of elaborated, sustained empathic attunement, holding, the patient comes to feel deeply held, securely understood, and safely anchored within the holding. So here is an elaborated paragraph. You might or might not do some of these. Now, let me just say, when you really enter into the patient's experience as part of the holding and you take it on as if it were your own, though it doesn't actually become your own. And the story I tell is, when people are upset that, the Patriots won. And so they're upset, but I'm like delighted that they're not from New England, so they're upset and sad. I'm not. I decenter from my own delight and I join alongside of them. And because I can't even remember who we won against. All I know is we were down by like 700 points. And thank you, Tom Brady. I mean, I was jumping and screaming so much that I think I bothered the neighbors. Gunner came rushing in. My dear sweet Gunner said, "My God, what's wrong?" I said, "We won. We won the Super Bowl. We won." Anyway, so it's not about, we decenter from our own and we join alongside of them. And when you do it, you can really, these will flow. So here we go. These are a series of them. I haven't gotten all of these said in my time, but I decided to create a flow just to give you a feel for an elaborated paragraph, a series of. A part of you longs so deeply to feel connected, to feel seen, known, held in the heart of another. And yet another part of you is terrified that if you let someone in too much, you'll be shattered. So I start with that Model 4 facilitation statement. Hear it? You yearn for closeness, but you also feel the need to protect yourself. Again, respectfully, with compassion. You're not judging, you're naming what you're hearing. You ache for warmth, but the risk of being betrayed or abandoned feels almost unbearable. Now, I hope people are going to put some stuff in the chat because I'm going to try to get through so that at least we will go beyond 2 and you can leave. You can discreetly slip away is fine, or not even discreetly, you can just slip away. But I hope people will put something in the chat. I really do. Okay, you yearn for closeness, but you also feel the need to protect yourself. You ache for warmth, but the risk of being betrayed or abandoned feels almost unbearable. Letting someone matter means giving them the power to hurt you, and you've been hurt too many times in the past. So you find yourself wanting to keep your distance in order to feel safe. And yet that very distance comes at a cost. The emptiness, the loneliness, the feeling of floating unanchored, disconnected even from yourself. And they may well be offering me, statements that are similar. And together we're weaving a tapestry that sort of defines, that kind of captures all of what, all of what they're feeling. It's as if you're caught in an impossible bind. Connection brings danger, but disconnection brings despair. God, Anne's iPad, we can see a hand there. No wonder it's hard to know which direction to move in. Maybe you could put your camera off. The Anne's iPad too, maybe put your camera off, maybe. And yet, and I don't know, thank you. I don't know whether I would do this often, and yet here you are sitting with me, allowing me at least to know this, which tells me that somewhere in you, there's still a brave hope that something new might be possible. I only do that sometimes. I don't want to slam in their face, well, you do keep coming, so clearly some part of you still hopes. That's a little bit, although that could be the disruptive attunement. That could be the provocation. Oh, okay. That could be the provocation. Okay. There's another one. Well, let me just see. I think That's good stuff, but whatever. I hope people I hope people are putting stuff in the chat. The provocation, I've said, the easing of rigid defense into resilient adaptation. So to review the defense that is going to be challenged, resistance, notice the R words, resistance, relentless hope, reenactment, retreat, and refractory inertia rooted in place, right? So I've already sort of referenced those. The A words, where you want to get them to by way of these disrupted cycles, these series, the healing cycles ongoing, disruption, repair, destabilization, restabilization at ever higher, more evolved levels of resilience. And quite frankly, I used to see it more as sort of like a little more rigidly, I guess. You get from over here, the left column with all the R words, to the A column, all the A words. But quite frankly, I've come over time to appreciate that just moment by moment in our lives, as we're confronted, like many times a day, with stressors that come our way. We weren't able to get our computer to work, happened earlier today, or we're not able to this, or we get a letter that's a little upsetting, or we can't remember, I couldn't remember modafinil. Thank you, Mita. I couldn't remember modafinil, Provigil, and so on. It's how we handle the stress of it, whether we defensively react and get all kind of bent out of shape, which frankly I did momentarily until Mita told me the answer, and then there you have it. Or whether we adaptively respond. And I know that sometimes over the course of a day, if I'm getting a little bent out of shape about something, the stress or is a little too much for me to take in my stride, my gunner, my dear sweet gunner, will say, now, remember the subtitle for your book, don't curse the darkness, light a candle. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Don't curse the darkness. Yeah, light the candle. Yep, okay, touche. Got it. Good point. And as it happens, my dear sweet gunner, he just rarely gets stressed about stuff. He just like, hey man, no problem. Just takes everything in his stride. So, all right, so let's see next here. And then the optimal stressor. I'll just say it because technically, I hope there are going to be comments in the chat, folks. The optimal stressor. Let's see, in each of the five. And so this one, let me just say, I kind of got lucky. The optimal stressor, so we got the R words are the defenses, we got the A words, the adaptations, and it's by way of working through these optimally stressful mismatch experiences that involve the introduction of disruptive attunement or provocation into the holding or the homeostatic attunement and the juxtaposition of them. And it's the working through of the internal dissonance or homeostatic imbalance that's created by these mismatch experiences, the optimal stress of these mismatch experiences is at the heart of deep embodied change, psychoanalytic, psychodynamic therapy, even the short-term intensive ones, the longer-term whatevers. And I've touched base with Dick Schwartz, IFS, David Feinstein, emotional freedom techniques, and all sorts of other people. So like, yeah, okay, well, yeah, you could say that. Yeah, therapeutic memory reconsolidation, juxtaposing old bad, new good, old bad, new good. Certainly the EMDR. I just spoke to one of my people, hypnotherapy, my supervisee. Yep. He said, yeah, okay, old bad, new good, old bad, new good. Yep, working that through is ultimately at the heart of deep embodied change. So back to the defenses start with R, the adaptations start with A, and the optimal stressors, they start with D. I got lucky on this one. I sort of feel I was blessed. D, model one. That's obvious cognitive dissonance. I mean, cognitive doesn't start with a D, but it's a cognitive approach. Cognitive dissonance, we know what that is. You work it through, interpreting. Model two, affective, or as some of them in self-psychology say optimal, but I use optimal in another way, optimal non-traumatic more generally. So affective disillusionment, there's your D. The disrupted positive transference, the disrupted narcissistic self-object transference, the disillusionment that is the result of the disruption and the working of that through affective disillusionment, and the net result of which will be put in a simple sentence here, a complex concept, but put in a simple sentence, adaptive structure building or uh, adaptive transmuting or structure building internalizations, whereby you internalize the good that had been there prior to the introduction of the empathic failure, the good that had been there prior to the introduction of the bad. And to be able to do that, you have to have evocative memory capacity. You have to be able to remember the good that had been there prior to the present bad. But as a result of working through affective disillusionment, there will be the adaptive transmuting internalizations, whereby you preserve internally a piece of the original external experience of goodness. Okay, so far so good, right? You with me here? Okay, model 3, we're working through projective identification, the inherent messiness, thank you, Edtronic, the negotiating at the intimate edge, thank you, Darlene Ehrenberg, of authentic relatedness, and such that it's a relational concept, detoxification, whereby the therapist lends aspects of her own more evolved capacity to process and integrate on behalf of a patient who truly does not know how. Remember, I said in model 3, one of the little sentences is the therapist is able to tolerate, process and integrate and take in her stride what the patient finds intolerable. And so the patient then projects and then exerts interpersonal pressure on the therapist to accept the projection, projective identification. That's the induction phase of a projective identification. And then the therapist initially is drawn into participating as everything the patient feared / hoped that the therapist would be, but then ultimately is able to step back from her participation in what has become a mutual enactment, a transference, countertransference, entanglement, messiness, able to hold herself accountable, able to process and integrate, and return to the patient a now slightly modified, detoxified, pathogenic introject. Thank you, Winnicott. Thank you, all those others. But thank you also, Thomas Ogden and Malin and Grotstein talk about projective identification in this way. I call it the induction phase and the resolution phase. And that's by way of a series of dilutions of the toxicity. A series of dilutions of the toxicity within the context of working at the intimate edge. Whereas model 2 is serial accretion. Whew, thank goodness, almost going to have to ask Mita for that word too. Model 2 is serial accretion of new good by working by the grieving and the adaptive internalizations. Model 3 is serial dilution of old bad. How do you like that? Model 2, serial accretion of new good. And model 3 is serial dilution of old bad. So anyway, model 3 is relational detoxification. Okay. And model 4, existential dependence. And this is a story I tell, that when Larry Hedges was driving me to the airport, and he was telling me, because I'd given a talk out there in LA. You folks out there in LA are very lucky. Anyway, I know the fire that wasn't, but otherwise lucky to live out in California. Anyway, so he was telling me I just simply had to come up with model 4. I just had to, relational deficit. I just had to, or practically he wasn't going to let me get out of the car and go back home to the East Coast. But anyway, so we came up with finally the concept of, a la Winnicott, absolute dependence, for the patient to be able to regress to a state of absolute dependence. And I thought, okay, absolute's not that descriptive, although if you know Winnicott, you know absolute dependence, relative dependence towards autonomy. So, okay, fine. So anyway, okay, Larry, I said, okay, Larry, all right, I got a model 4. Okay. Anyway, so then I come home and I think, well, this is an existential humanistic approach. I wonder, and since I've used cognitive for model 1, affective for model 2, relational for model 3, for model 4, I wonder what existential dependence would be. So I quote existential dependence, end quote. This is long before AI, but somehow my computer was smart. You know, computers are very smart. So Google was smart, I guess. And I put that in. And lo and behold, existential dependence is a concept that the philosophers and existentialists and nihilists and everybody have been using for a long time. And it means absolutely dependent upon another for one's very existence. There you have it. So this is existential dependence. I got lucky. Cognitive, affective, relational, existential. And then model 5, quantum neuroscientific. The D word, I get 2 D words here. Disentanglement. D, that's a good one. Remember I'd said model 5 is about disentangling, rescripting, and updating. So quantum disentanglement from the old bad. And then neuroscientific, throw that in there too. Synaptic, right? Look at how that works there. Deconditioning. I mean, really, really. Okay. I feel that somebody's with me. And finally, I'm getting near the end here, and I hope I'm going to wrap up at 2. I think I'm going to stop and I'm going to look at questions in the chat, or a little after 2. But you can just slip away discreetly. That's fine. No offense. I won't even know that you're gone. Okay, so the transformative rewards of deep psychodynamic work emerge through the interwoven synergy of the 5 distinct yet mutually enhancing models. So there are a lot of overlap and similarity, but there are also things that are distinct to and specific to each of the 5. In classical psychoanalytic terms, you develop as a result of working through and gaining more awareness or insight. I would have said insight, but insight doesn't start with the letter A, so I had to say awareness. So a stronger, wiser, and more self-aware ego. And during my training, we used to talk about ego strength, right? We didn't talk about the self. We talked about the ego and whether or not a control would be appropriate for a control analysis, whether they had enough ego strength. Model 2, along then comes the concept, thank you, Gohut and others, and the Ornsteins and Dr. Ava Ross. Now we have more the self, and self-structure and self-deficit and so on, and self-regulation, self-esteem regulation, the capacity to be good a parent, caregiver unto oneself. So the net result of this, as you evolve from relentless hope to acceptance, will be a more compassionate towards others and towards oneself, accepting self towards others and towards oneself. Now the language is self. Model 3, as we evolve from a compulsive and unwitting reenactment to accountability. And now we have a more accountable and empowered relational self in relation. People at the Stone Center talk about the self in relation or the relational self, like, yeah. So the focus. So model 1, a 1 person. I said this earlier. Model 2, a 1.5 person. Model 3, a 2 person. Psychology. Model 4, we have a more, as we evolve from retreat to accessibility or awareness. No, accessibility or approachability, or maybe awakening or aliveness, maybe, but those might have to be words that I use from model 6, so I'm careful about using those words. Anyway, a more awakened self. And model 5, we talk about an envisioned, action-oriented future self or possible self. And there's a theory about possible selves. Jen Scruggs taught me about that one, a theory about possible selves. All righty, models 1 through 4 really aren't about possible. All right, I'm almost done here. Let's see. This would have been interesting, but no time. But don't worry, it is interesting. But you have it, you have it in your portal, or you have it. It was sent to you. This is sort of interesting. Conflict statements. I do one conflict statement. Do I know how to go backwards? Yes. Here's one. I have to read this to you. And again, you guys can go. It's fine. You know that if your relationship with Alana is to survive, you'll need to take at least some responsibility for the part you're playing in the incredibly abusive fights that you and she are having. Do they know that? Yeah. Does it make them anxious? Yeah. Is it a provocation? Is it a direct disruptive attunement? Yeah. But then you say, but you tell yourself, this is where you've so entered into their experience, you understand why they do what they do. But you tell yourself that it isn't really your fault, because if she weren't so provocative, then you wouldn't have to be so vindictive. And they say, exactly. And then they can go on, they say, but, I do know that, I mean, technically, sometimes for me to be hitting her, for example, is that probably not a good thing, but then she can just be so doggone. So they begin to appreciate the concept of, within them, awareness of their internal dynamics, awareness, insight, self-awareness, self-reflective awareness. That's what we wanted. Here's another one, the third one. oh, here, the fourth one. You're coming to understand that your anger can put people off. Now, it's about what happens in relationship, but I'm talking about their internal awareness of, the and the. You're coming to understand that your anger can put people off, but you tell yourself that you have a right to be as angry as you want because of how much you've had to suffer over the course of the years. Can you see how it means you're really understanding them? Motto 2, first you highlight what had been the patient's illusion, their defensive need for relentless hope. Then you highlight the reality of their disillusionment, the adaptive capacity to confront. And then you resonate empathically with the pain and the anger of their grief, their adaptive capacity to feel the actual heartbreak. Okay. A lot of those accountability statements or relational interventions. I just have to say my rule of 3 because people always like this. Or Erwin Hoffman's beautiful friend of Paul Levinson's. I want to tell you X, but I'm afraid that Y. So here's a good one. I'm tempted to give you the advice for which you are looking. You share with them your own state of internal dividedness. Tempted to give you the advice for which you're looking, but my fear is that were I to do so, I might be robbing you of the impetus to find your own answers. That's just brilliant. When you find yourself like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? You share with them your own state of internal conflictedness, and then you get to say both parts. I find myself feeling angry with you for being so often late and wanting you to understand how it impacts me. But then it occurs to me that it might be more important for us to try to understand what you might be wanting to communicate to me by way of your frequent lateness. I would not want to do you or us the disservice of ignoring that. Isn't that great? All right, let's see. Oh, here's you'll like this one. To a patient who says she wants, oh, hello, Perry. To a patient who says she wants the therapist's approval regarding her decision to terminate, a termination that the therapist thinks is premature. I'm tempted simply to offer you the approval you are seeking. It is, after all, important that you do what feels right for you. But I'm also aware of feeling within myself that the time is too soon, and that were I to support your decision to leave, I might ultimately be doing you a disservice. Do you see how you get both sides said? So you don't have to come down in favor of the one or the other. Okay, rule of 3. I'll say this real quick. I know my eyes on the time, almost done. The rule of 3, for the patient who has done something that you experience as provocative, you experience as provocative, you do this to compel the patient to take ownership. So this is in model 3 because they've done it in relation to you, of what she's playing out on the stage of the treatment. You might ask, the therapist might ask the patient any or all of the following 3. How are you hoping that I will respond? Which speaks to the patient's id. And or, how are you afraid that I might respond? Which speaks to their superego. Or, how do you imagine that I will respond? Which speaks to the executive functioning of their ego, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex of the brain. All 3 of which demand of the patient that she make explicit her interpersonal intentions, accountability, and empowerment. And real quick, so as I was leaving a session back in the day when I met people in person and patients with whom I've been working for some time, and at the door, her doorknob, door handle comment. She says, oh, by the way, I think I'm going to take a break for a little while. And I sort of went, oh my God, defensively reacting inside of myself, like, oh my God, what do I do now? I finally figured out, I'll say, how do you imagine that I'm going to respond to that? I figured I'd get a little supervision from her. And she said, oh, you're probably just going to say, come back next time and we'll talk about it. And I said, yes, come back next time and we'll talk about it. So she came back the next time and she stayed another 7 years. All right, so there you go. Okay, facilitation statements, and then we have some quantum disentanglement ones. Okay, last 3 slides. Okay, last 3 slides. One of my favorite quotes, Christopher Logue's, come to the edge. I guess that's the San Francisco Bay Bridge there. Come to the edge. We might fall. Come to the edge. It's too high. Come to the edge. And they came, and he pushed, and they flew. What if I fall? The girl with little angel wings. What if I fall? Oh, Erin Hansen, EH. Oh, but my darling, what if you fly? So she took the leap and built her wings on the way down. That's it, folks. And if you want to be in my entirely free weekly spot supervision Zoom sessions, please just email me. I think it's in the thing, Martha Stark MD at synergymed.solutions. And I think I'm going to stop share. And oh, good, here you are. Oh, thank you all. All right, so now I'm gonna have courage and I go look in the chat. Oh my goodness, look at this, the chat. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, good. If I can, Gina, is it okay? I just kind of quickly read these
Yeah,
things.
you could, yeah, read through it, but thank you.
Okay. And I appreciate you diehards who are still on here. There's Nita again, Carol Jocelyn. Oh, good. Sean is still here. Ehsan, I'm so glad you're here. And Jen's beautiful smile there. Deb, hello, Deb Filiurin. Hello, Deb. And so on. Sorry, and Jim Sharp. I'm sorry, just look real quick, like, thank you. Don't go. Katrine. And there's Donna again. Stephanie Barth, Mary up seated. Boreana, hello, Boreana. And Mita, of course, John Parkerson. Christine, hello, Christine. Loves glasses. And Mitch is still here. Carol Willis is on. And Mita, Sarah Richard. Okay, good. I'm going to go back to these questions here. Thank you all for still being here. Okay. Okay, let me get to the top here. Okay. Yes, Carol. Carol Willis said thank you for the invitation. Joanne, hello, thank you for the invite. Good. Richard Kim, sorry I was a bit late. If Dr. Stark or someone else at some point later in the conference could provide the link for her weekly supervision group, I'd appreciate it. So, so Richard, you will email me, and then you will get, you already know then about my method here, so I'll put you on the list. You will qualify. It's all good. So please, Richard Kim, email me. Gina Kwan, for those interested, oh, thank you, Gina, in joining, here's the email, and email Martha. Martha Stark, MD at synergymed.solutions. Ilana, hello, Ilana, from years ago. Ilana, I did a conference like 35 years ago, and there she was in the front row at the place she used to work at in those days. Okay, thank you, said Ilana. We welcome any questions, reflections, or musings. Jim, Martha, thank you so much for bringing great hope for our work. You have an implied, model of health. How might you summarize it? Well, does it not have an inevitable cultural bias? Oh, wow, Gina, you're going to like that question. Because I'm a product of my own culture, I don't know. I guess it probably does, although my spot supervision groups are sort of have a global reach, and people from different continents and all sorts of different places have it. So I guess I would want to say, picking up on ACT and classical psychoanalytic and ego psychology, I just kind of lifted from them, where I simply know that they talk about the importance of evolving from rigidity to resilience. I don't know if that's cultural bias, but I believe profoundly that I think I have probably a psychoanalytic bias, and that, of course, isn't just the United States. That's from other cultures as well. But I think, yeah, fundamentally, I would say, and I get to have the pleasure of kind of repeating this, that deep embodied change, structural change, whether it's about structural conflict, structural deficit, relational conflict, or relational deficit. So deep embodied structural change has to do with belatedly creating for the patient the opportunity to work through and resolve the internal dissonance and homeostatic imbalance created by your generation strategically of these optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experiences between old bad and new good, whatever culturally old bad would be and culturally new good would be, juxtaposing them. EMDR, I don't know, isn't that done around the world at this point? Fran Solomon, right around the world. So I don't know. So I guess the cultural is so in me that I can't even tell if it's cultural bias, but I know these things are kind of universal. But anyway, so working through and resolving the mismatch experiences between old bad and new good, and so on. So that's my thought there. So thank you.
Can I say something?
Yes, please, real quick, like Deb. Yes.
I had a patient call me recently, and after about a year or so, he's talked about the old bad thinking.
Oh, thank you.
And I thought, geez, where did I get that from? And while we were talking today, I realized it was one of your courses in 1990 in Newton. And that's how long ago. And when I started using that language, all
Oh,
this is so brilliant. It works so well. You're much more creative and more courageous in how you say those two parts. Yet I get those two parts said, but I'm going to try to take more chances and hope that they don't hang up on me. Um, I'll say it with love.
oh,
I'm
thank you,
more
dear.
concerned with the people who don't allow me those interventions. And maybe this is where you say, come on Thursdays for supervision. So,
Yes, because I promise I really do. I mean, it's so easy. You just sign up and then you can watch the recordings,
okay.
later view them at your own and view part of them. And I'll never know that you only listened to 5 minutes. I mean, it's all good, Deb. And it's so good to see you again.
Good
Yes,
to
I
see.
used to teach. I had a continuing medical education program. I could give out CMEs and CEs back in the 90s. And people would come to my little dining room area, which I'd converted over into my, and because I have people take their shoes off when they come into my home. I provided little slippers for people, and they were the happy feet, the little happy feet, that whatever, had these big things. And so there were little chairs, and there'd be like room for like 30 people, and they sit in a circle there. And the men wore these happy feet, and the women wore the happy feet, and they all had their little happy feet on. And I used to run all those courses. Thank you. That was like 35, 40 years ago. Oh my God. And on some level, it's interesting. I both think that my thinking and my work has just evolved tremendously over the course of the decades. I mean, I sort of feel that. And I pride myself on that, that from one day to the next, even I realize, oh, I want to tweak that a little bit. And I understand it even ever more deeply. Although then I go back, now I'm going back to reread some of the lectures that I used to give, and I'm now going to start presenting some of those. And it's sort of like, oh my God, I was saying this 35 years ago, which is both sobering and exciting. It's sort of like, oh my God. Now it is more elaborated, although it's a little bit like when I went back to my elementary school reunion. And everybody recognized me. And they said, oh, Martha, you still have your bangs and you still have your hair. You look just the way you did when you were very young. Now, that's sort of a compliment, sort of not, but be that as it may. But anyway, so thank you, Deb. It's really great to see you. And I love your office and your home and where you see your people. You and I know what that means. All right, so here we go. Okay, so from Jim Sharp. Hello, Jim. Yes, yes. Jim Sharp. Martha, you mentioned that empathy is about the patient and not about you. Hence, close tracking, micro tracking. Yes, that's true. Yet conventionally, oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. What a brilliant question. That empathy comes from going to a place within ourselves, say times when we too felt vulnerable, to understand the vulnerability in another. And of course, vicarious introspection, cohuts, means sort of imaginatively kind of knowing what you might have and therefore what they might have. So I am going to address this wonderful question. I'm so glad you brought it up. Is this step of turning toward self a detour from being present in the sense you suggest? That is so beautiful. Oh my God, thank you. So this gives me an opportunity to say the following. And I'm going to say it. And some people are going to be nodding us, oh, yes, yes, yes. And some of you are going to say, nah, I don't think so. I don't think so. And when I presented this in the past, a little divided. Some people say yes, and other people say no. Here we go. I'm going to be, oh, there's Mitch again. I'm going to be saying, and Richard Kim, I'm going to be saying Model 2 is a self-psychology, is a story about empathic attunement, whereby we decenter from our own subjectivity, from our own countertransference, and join alongside the patient, taking on their experience as if it were our own, though it never really becomes our own. And I think that Evie Schwaber in the 1990s had written a paper entitled Countertransference, and she's totally empathic. Those of you who know her know empathy is her middle name. Evie Empathic Schwaber. Countertransference, she wrote in the 1990s. Countertransference, the analyst's retreat from the patient's vantage point. So when you get too caught up in what you yourself are sort of thinking or feeling, beware of that. Now, all right, I'll get back to this. That's okay. So model 2, empathic attunement. You decenter from your own subjectivity. Now, you can also, with some finesse, be sort of thinking about it, kind of informs who you are. So you think you're decentering from it, but of course, you still have elemental as part of your tissues, your cells, your quantum, your energetic, whatever. And that on some level informs your capacity to hear them. But model 3, the intersubjective perspective of contemporary relational theory, I think is about authentic engagement, whereby projective identification, whereby you allow the patient's experience to come into you and you take it on as your own. That's the induction phase of the projective identification. And initially, you're drawn into participating in the very way that they feared you would. That's the induction phase of a projective identification. But ultimately, you're able to lend aspects of your own capacity to process and integrate such that you give back to them a modified, detoxified version. That's the resolution phase. You do that by way of use of self, use of self. I'm using myself to find and to be found by the patient. Authentic relational object. And that the people, the William Allen White Institute, I mean, I learned a lot at the feet of some of them. And although they were sometimes faulted for seeing the unconscious as a black box, but what they're playing out in the here and now and what's going on. So I would claim that empathy and authenticity. Empathy is one thing, model 2, authenticity is another. Let me give you something else. So I was on a panel, blessed to be on a panel with Dick Geist, and I think it was the Ornsteins, Paul and Anna Ornstein, back in the 1990s, and me. And we were representing the more empathic perspective, actually. And we were asked a very smart question. We were asked, if you were all sitting with the same patient, and you were to be being the ideal of empathically attuned, would you all basically feel or say the same thing? And we all said yes, ideally. It's not about our own subjectivity. It's not about the use of self. It's not about the use of our countertransference. Although, of course, and now we get into sort of like, well, do you use your intellect, cognitive? Yeah. Do you use your search for meaning, model 4? Do you lean into the edge between the present and the future? I mean, you're all of these things. But technically, I think there really is a difference. So, Jim, that would be my answer. So you're finding it's this step of turning toward a self, a detour from being present. I think they're just different, slightly different things. And I can feel it when I'm being empathically attuned. It's not primarily about me. When I'm being authentically engaged and focused in on the here and now engagement and the co-creation of back and forth, and mutual transference, countertransference, enactment, and messiness, whatever, intimate edge, negotiating, that for me is about authentic engagement. Model 2, authentic attunement. Model 2, empathic attunement. Model 3, authentic engagement. Now, even as I'm saying this, I got a nice, nod from Jim Sharp on that. Oh, good. And even as I'm saying this, I realize they're like, well, I'm using empathic attunement now for more generally what we do as the backdrop. I want to refine that a little bit because I also see it as being fundamental to model 2, but also fundamentally. I mean, I'm fundamentally model 1. I'm fundamentally model 2. I'm fundamentally model 3. I'm fundamentally model 4. I'm fundamentally model 5. Which I guess means the synergy. It's a psychodynamic synergy paradigm. All right, there you go. Thank you, Jim. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you for that very sophisticated question. Karen Steinberg, thank you so much, Dr. Stark, for this outstanding, incredibly meaningful, thorough, and helpful presentation. Many, many valuable takeaways and integrated understandings. I'm grateful to have attended. Oh, thank you. Charlotte Sills from the UK, from way back years ago when we were in that online group together. I'd love to hear a bit more about the difference between Model 2 and Model 4. Good to pick up on that. So let me just briefly say that. I hope you say a bit more. So I'm going to take that as meaning briefly. Model 2 is more about a self that relies upon external reinforcement and supplies in order to sort of reinforce one's self-esteem and good feelings about oneself, and a yearning and a longing to be able to get now kind of the perfect caregiving that was never consistently and reliably provided early on. And then when you get it, it just feels so good. It just feels so good. You're not conflicted about it. It's like all good. It feels so good. And ultimately, though, if all goes well, when there are the inevitable failures, empathic failures, and Kohut and them other folks say inevitably it will happen because nobody's perfect. The mother isn't, the therapist isn't. And you empathically fail the patient will work through the disrupted positive transference, the disillusionment, and adaptively internalize those functions, and then fill in deficit and be able to provide for themselves self-esteem regulation. Okay, Model 4. That was Model 2. Model 4, the emphasis is a little different. These are people who, quite frankly, whereas Model 2, they have relentless hope because they keep hoping that they'll get the reinforcement from the outside. All right, Model 4, relentless despair. They have given up hoping, and they have retreated and have a terrible sense. A rock feels no pain and an island never cries. And they've retreated into a very private place, Winnicott's true self. And the false self is presented to the world, but the true self that houses both heartbreak and both pathology, not that heartbreak's necessarily pathology, but both pathology and spontaneity and true, and it's all good, but it's hidden. It's hidden. It's a private self, and the patient, the illusions of grandiose self-sufficiency. Thank you very much. I can do it on my own, and it's so different. They're not ever busy wanting reinforcement. Oh, no. And quite frankly, an image that somebody suggested from Model 4 is the idea of somebody wanting. So this is somebody wanting connection, and this is sort of no can do. Nope, you can't go there. So in Model 4, what gives rise to that is a kind of despair and a kind of not wanting, but desperately yearning, but not wanting about relationship, not as much about self-esteem. And here is regress to redo, I think of scalar energy, but just start over again. Model 2 is not about starting over. And so Model 4 is about harmonious interpenetrating mix-up, the two as one, O for a shell, whatever. Did I do okay on that, Charlotte? I hope so. I got 2 thumbs up. Thank you. One is from Model 2 and one is from Model 4. Okay. Mita would like to understand Model 4. Seems difficult to me. Any suggestions, articles, books to understand Model 4 in depth? Yeah, Arnie Modell. Read anything of his. Arnie Modell. And Harry Gunford. And Masood Khan, Khan. Yeah, absolutely, Model 4. And interesting on Model 4, that's where people discreetly send me an email once I introduced Model 4, and they said, oh my God, I'm really Model 4. Well, in truth, part of them is Model 4, but that doesn't mean all of them is Model 4. We're all part of everything. But some people really identify with Model 4. That struggling with search for meaning and struggling to feel not so dissociated or disconnected from the world or from people. It's about being disengaged, but yearning and longing. Donald Burnham's need-fear dilemma, yearning and longing, but terrified. Yearning and longing, but terrified, really conflicted about relationship. Model 2, they're not conflicted, just gimme the validation, give me the narcissistic supplies. No conflict whatsoever. Model 4, totally conflicted about even being in relationship. Okay. And then of course the Winnicott quote that I can never remember, but Hassan keeps filling me in on it. It's a joy to be found, a joy to remain hidden, but a disaster not to be found. I think that's it. Okay. Stephanie Barthmere. Oh, thank you so much, Stephanie. So good to see Stephanie. Significant aha moment. Aha, not aha, but aha moment today was adding the word, relational to Model 3. Accountability statements. Yeah, okay, yeah. Relational accountability statements. Maybe I just need to call them that instead of, relational interventions and accountability statements. Maybe I got to put both words in there. Stephanie tells me yes. Stephanie tells me what to do and I go do it. Thank you. Thank you, Martha. Oh, and Oh, you like serial accretion, Model 2 adding, and serial dilution. Yeah, you like that. She likes that. Um, Thank you. It's like you were conducting an orchestra. I could hear the music. Oh, thank you. Okay, Virginia, thank you so much, Dr. Stark, for such a well-structured and concentrated presentation, which strongly resonates with my own approach to work. There will certainly be many more things for me to reflect on and integrate. My deep appreciation for your generosity. Oh, thank you. Okay, David, whom I enjoyed looking at. Let's see. Dr. Stark, thank you once again for a beautiful, instructive, and passionate presentation. You are invaluable. Much love. Much love to you. I can't see you in the moment, but much love to you. Oh, there's Marcia, Carrie, and Joel Green. Oh, good. Okay, so let's see. Oh, and somebody said yes. Oh, Stephanie said yes. Okay, Joanne, thank you, Dr. Stark, for this informative presentation. Many insights have been had, and so grateful for your expertise, wisdom, and passion. Thank you so much, Ilana Steinberg. There is so much to take away and use with my clients. Terry Simpson, wonderful. Oh, thank you so much. Maria, thank you so much. Oh, these are wonderful. I wasn't expecting necessarily to reading all these, but let's see. Jenny, many thanks, Martha. She's fly fishing now for your generous presentation. Thank you also to Gina and Teresa for all the work that goes into organizing this training. Yes, people don't begin to realize when people write in, I think Gina will probably understand this one, 2 minutes before it's to start, and they say, can I have the link? I don't know, Gina, if that resonates for you at all, but or where is the link, even though we sent it out twice? It's like, where are the PDFs? Well, I've sent them out twice now. All right, David, so sorry to have to leave as our patient. Okay, Donna Mahoney on Saturday. Donna Mahoney, so grateful, Dr. Shuck. I love your theoretical material, of course, but really love the interventions that are both supportive, involving holding, and provocative. So useful and creative. Thank you. All right, Jan's under inspiring, meta theory that reflects a lifetime of inside witnessing of the growth our field. It was a joy to listen to your live. Oh, thank you. And boy, what an achievement to share so much in a brief 2-hour lecture. And thank you for generously sharing. Oh, God, these are lovely. I didn't really mean to be reading necessarily all of these wonderful things, although I do have to say I enjoy it. But Paul, Boriana, thank you so much for hosting Gina. And thank you, Dr. Stark. Questions, I'm open to questions. Stephanie, love that. Thank you, Martha. We're almost done. A beautiful and enlightening presentation. I'm open to questions. Maybe you'll raise your hand. Thank you for sharing. Paul, wonderful presentation, concise, thorough, explanatory. Okay, good. And Richard, I don't consider myself an expert, but I've trained in ISTDP and and in psychoanalytic training now. I'm having a bit of a crisis as I have found ISTDP incredibly useful. Yes, it informed a lot my Model 5. I've found useful Davenlou's central dynamic sequence technique of pressing for the experience of complex transference feelings, rage, grief, guilt, and love in an unconsciously open, deeply somatically felt portrayal of rage toward those patients love to hurt them. And we get a Christine Amos saying yes. So let me tell you about Habib Davanlou, who trained in psychoanalytic stuff in Boston. And then he found that for him, that didn't quite do it. So back in the 1990s, I had just published my 2 books. One was called Working with Resistance, and the other was called A Primer on Working with Resistance. And they're 2 separate books, and they're both available at no charge from me, all right, as ebooks. And so people told me, it's up in New Hampshire. I know you live in Cambridge, but you have to hear Habib Davanlou. He's a 6-hour-long presentation. So I said, okay, I'm going there. So I sat there, I plunked myself in the front row. I'm sitting there listening to Habib Davanlou. I'd never been exposed, I promise, to any of his work before. And I sat there and I thought, oh my God, I must have copied from his work. I had just published my books on working with resistance. And it's sort of like, I have never anybody's work have I more resonated with over the course of the last 50 years than Habib Davanlou. And I mean, he didn't copy my work. I hadn't even written it yet. And I didn't copy his work. I really didn't know it. So yes, back in the day, I haven't been back to revisit it, but I know that ISTDP, yes. And it's different. I know it's different and profound and good stuff. And Al Peso, I got training in that work along with Pat Ogden and Bessel van der Kolk. We went up to New Hampshire or maybe it's Vermont, I think it was New Hampshire, whatever, strolling woods, and we all learned one summer, and that was a certain sequence of things, a certain thing, you do this, that, whatever. ISTDP, AEDP, somatic experiencing, Peter Levine, I've had long conversations with him about stuff, all this stuff, sensory motor psychotherapy, all of that went into informing my getting it about Model 5, my creating Model 5, which has different inputs. My supervisee who does hypnotherapy and has a certain sequence he goes through. But ultimately, and I guess this would be the question, Richard, is if indeed, and I'd have to go back and sort of think about Davenlou stuff, if ultimately it really is about juxtaposing old bad, new good, old bad, new good, no matter how you do it, that ultimately it really is an evolving through healing, iterative healing cycles from this, which is more rigid, more reactive, to this, which is more resilient and more responsive. So that would be the question. How you get there, right, TBD. So anyway, thank you. Okay, good. Moving on. Richard. However, I'm struggling because I think, even though ISTDP practitioners might disagree, that because I think that that privilege is the experience of anger, guilt, grief, love, complex. That, because I think that privileges the experience of anger, guilt, grief, love, complex in a portrayal, and by this, even through this framework, brings out defenses and resistances to closeness very powerfully. Yeah, oh, good. That it is, oh, nevertheless narrow. Oh, huh, okay. Well, I mean, the reason for my having my different models is I found each one a little bit, I appreciate your honesty there, Richard, each one maybe a little narrow, so better to have, and now people in my different teaching and whatever, brain spotting, it's like, oh my God, I got to get that in there. And certainly the body stuff and other things. So that's why, oh my God, I got to do a 6th model. And then maybe there'll be a 7th model. Of course, got to live a long time, but because I keep realizing things, whatever, but that fundamentally, however you get there, but interesting because it's nevertheless narrow. Sometimes when there's a scripted protocol, I think you might be saying this, there's a certain sequence, a scripted protocol. First, and then, and I do EMDR on patients. I have to read my little sheet of paper and so on, and I read it. I'm not very good at it, but patients are like, oh my God, they do some kind of interesting and powerful stuff and get in touch with stuff. So that's cool. That's also Model 5. All right, but anyway, so I want to do justice by your lovely thing here. Too narrow. You lay out the complexity of the ways we can support and press, encourage patients. Yes, provoke them. Oh, thank you. I find I use the triangle of conflict. Yes, I had the privilege of being in a neuroscience study group with Bessel van der Kolk and John Rady, and I hate it when I forget names. The wonderful dear woman who was tall, had been married to Bemperad. Oh, the wonderful woman to the triangle conflict. Oh, well, she has since passed, heartbreakingly. Anyway, I find a use of the triangle conflict and explore feelings, but don't go all the way to a portrayal. Okay, I think I use a more Paul Gray approach. I can't remember enough what he says. Would it be okay to start with an ISTDP framework and then incorporate your 5 ways of therapeutic approaches? Yes, you could. Yes, you could. Some will start with an embodied something and then build on it. And then incorporate. Yes, start with an ISTDP. I like that. And I mean, Habib Davenlou, and then incorporate your 5 ways of therapeutic approaches. Yes, you can. I think you could. Also, a supervisor said you should stick with one approach. I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, I know I have one overarching conceptual framework, which is helpful for me. I don't think we need to stick with, I don't feel that. I believe in flexibility and resilience. Can you utilize multiple approaches, even not analytic in the same patient and not confuse the patient? Oh, absolutely. Nancy Williams gives a wonderful example. And I'm so sorry. I know I'm going on here. Oh my God. All right. I'm so sorry. Thank you. You can slip away and I won't even know it, even though I'll see your face disappear. But what was I going to say? Oh, Nancy McWilliams gives this wonderful example of where, her daughter was just in a rage at her because the mother was saying, Nancy was saying, her adolescent daughter, you have to clean your room. And so the the daughter's in the room and opens the door and flings it open and says, I hate you, you're a horrible mother, and you know, you're awful. And Nancy is just wonderfully sweet and understanding and empathic and gets it and understands, doesn't retaliate, and not vindictive, not nothing, and so on, and listens and understands her daughter's upset. And then the mother says, you still have to go into your room and clean your room before you can go out. So it's like different modalities. I don't see them as contradictory. I was the same patient, moment by moment. They have elements that are neurotic, elements that are narcissistic, elements that are, I didn't emphasize it today, but for example, I'll try to do this because this, Richard, is such a profound, I really appreciate your thoughtful comment here, very much appreciated. So in the moment, in model 1, well, okay. So underlying, so the undertow, what's underlying it will be either the N words, narcissistic model, neurotic model 1, narcissistic model 2, noxious relatedness model 3, non-relatedness model 4, and non-action model 5. That's undertow. That's the undertow. That's, at least for now or for the foreseeable future, for the next numbers of months or years, that tends to be the undertow. What's egosyntonic for them, if you will. But moment by moment, as you sit with the patient, the point of emotional urgency, the locus of their narcissism, that determines whether you do 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 in that moment by moment. So in model 1, when the patient in the moment is all jammed up, you know what jammed up means? Neurotic, conflicted, jammed up, you know. I mean, the obvious, I always sort of give this example. Can I masturbate or not? You know, can I be bad, i.e. masturbate, or must I comply and sort of not? And but neurotically jammed up, can I complete my dissertation or not? And they're jammed up and neurotic and they're struggling and oh my God, and struggling and neurotic, jammed up, conflicted, one person, conflict, whatever. Then you go with a conflict statement. You know that, but you find yourself. Okay, model 2, when they're ever busy, they just want their boss, if only, or their partner, if only their mother, if only their child, or if only you, a therapist, would give me the answers, if only you would tell me that you love me. Please, 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 I need it to go on. Then you're thinking, relentless hope. Ultimately, we need to create a space for them, safe space for them to do the very necessary grieving. Why is it important to grieve? Because in the aftermath of that, there'll be the adaptive internalizings of capacity, caregiving capacity, such that you fill in deficit. And so on. So so that's a different. All right. But now in the moment, let's say they are, by golly, they are playing stuff out in the here and now engagement. Like, my God, they keep thinking you don't understand, that you are critical, that you this, and they're compulsively and unwittingly reenacting unmastered early on relational traumas. And so you're thinking like, whoa, we need to be doing some relational accountability statements. Thank you, Stephanie. Some relational accountability statements here. And we need to zero in on what is being compulsively and unwittingly reenacted, because that's all they've ever known, and because they're desperately hoping for there to be a different outcome this time. So that's very different. That's model 3. You're going to negotiate at the intimate edge. And so you do a relational accountability statement. All right, now we're doing number 4. In the moment, the patient just raw and in deep, deep heartbreak and despair. And we actually had, I can say, I'm not giving away any details other than that the patient presented most recently, had deep, deep, deep despair. Deep, deep, deep despair. And then we're thinking, though there was some borderline-y kind of acting out, sort of, it was derivative. The despair was something that had been there from way, way, way back. And so then you're thinking model 4 and their need to be held, and for you to be, appreciating that for you to get it, that they're very conflicted about even being in the room with you, because it's so fraught with so much anxiety and panic and terror about being found and being broken and being destroyed, or merging and then losing the self that way, ego dissolution that way. so that then you know Model 4 stuff. And Model 5 stuff is when, quite frankly, my God, a combination of stuff and the patient and you are getting a little frustrated, like enough already. I mean, either just get your goddamn taxes done or get the weight off or go on the diet or get out of the marriage or get into the marriage or whatever. And where there's refractory inertia, where there's analysis paralysis, neural entrenchment, old, bad, this, that, whatever. And in which case, together, you and the patient co-create these quantum disentanglement statements that get written down that can be very long, and you work them together. And I get my own benefit from co-creating these because I could always stand for some improvement here. And you, old, bad, and in an embodied way, and emotion and heartfelt and this and that. And then, but you envision, you lean into the edge between the present and the future. And those statements get read, sometimes read together, written down on a sheet of paper. I have a patient who gets acupuncture done and reads her quantum disentanglement statements while she's doing it. Anyway, I hope that said a little bit there, Richard, and I hope that was helpful. I don't think it would confuse the patient. It might confuse us a little bit. I don't think it'll confuse the patient. Yeah, so the patient can many different things at the same time. Okay, Paul, here we have. Paul, I guess then I thought you were a lawyer before, but I guess you're a librarian. Can you give the author, yep, librarian. Can you give the author reference for your use of the term, a narcissistic alliance? It's Robert Mellman. That paper, I had written to him and I haven't heard back yet. He's now rather elderly. I'm going to try again to get the reference. It was just a paper he presented back in 1976 at the Boston Psychoanalytic, a beautiful paper. And I don't have the paper. I'm so sorry, but I remember it deep in my heart, so I don't have the reference. Thank you, Paul. I will try to be finding it between therapist and patient. I believe you cited Paul Russell, but in a PEP web search, I don't find a Russell reference. Yeah, he was another one. He and George Fishman and Bob Fox and one or two others, they just did, and Semrat, they didn't write enough. I don't know that Paul Russell really has that. I might be able to find somewhere. It's probably down in Clearwater Beach. Maybe it has a lot of hurricane water on it for all I know. But there was a Paul Russell article that I had. I'll see if someday I can retrieve it, but I don't have it in the moment. And it wasn't really, he didn't really publish. People should publish. Oh, here. Oh, you have something here. Okay, good. So Christine Amos, thank you, Martha. I also learned so much each time. Thank you, Christine, for coming each time. I wonder about the resistance to change being so good, but unwitting in that it may seem the person doesn't want deep embodied change, but she doesn't know it to be something she can have. Could and does the therapist miss this? I mean, I think patient and therapist are both conflicted about whether or not the patient does or doesn't want the change and whether or not they are willing to do the work that would be required to get them to do deep embodied change. Sorry, I don't have the good time to make this clear. I will for the future. Okay, so therapist. Yeah, it's so complex. There are layers of complexity and nuance. They do want to change, they don't want to change. They do and they don't. And then they do and they don't. And actually they do and they don't. And moment to moment it changes. Okay, Paul, here we have Paul again. Oh, good. And thanks for Gina and colleagues for presenting this program. More bang for the buck as well as consolidating knowledge. Thank you. And technique. Then a semester in a psychoanalytic institute. Oh my God, thank you. Charlotte Sills, thank you. I got it. And thank you for a brilliant presentation. You got my explanation. Yes, thumbs up. Full from Model 2 and Model 4. Full of great materials. Thank you, Martha, for this inspiring. Thank you, Dr. Ava. I'm so flattered and delighted that Dr. Ava comes so regularly and consistently, even though she spends time with Paulina and Anton, her grandchildren. And she comes regularly to my spot supervisions, and she's always there. She's Paul and Anna Ornstein's heir apparent and heir. Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Martha and Gina said Aizwan. And there's Aizwan still on there. Hi, Aizwan, thank you. And Charlotte sadly must go. Again, many thanks. Carol Willis, this isn't even her whatever, and she's always here, and I just love it. I love the distinction, oh, good, between empathic attunement and authentic engagement. She's a philosopher, amongst many other things. In actual practice, this may go back and forth between the two ways of being with, which seems very natural. Did I understand that right? Yeah, I bet you did. I bet you did. I bet you did. Two different ways of being with. Carol goes on to explain. Are both of these ways of being with applied in Model 4 and 5 as well? Okay, right. Because here I am busy saying, oh, these are such good questions. Thank you, Carol. So model 2, I'm emphasizing empathic attunement. Model 3, I'm almost done, folks. I'm almost done, folks. Model 2, empathic attunement. Model 3, authentic engagement. Meanwhile, empathic attunement is the backdrop for laying the foundation of the holding. So they are used as backdrop for everything, for just being present. They're there all the time. Being with as both, being with. There are 5 ways of being with. Oh, yes, there are 5 ways of being with. I hope, Carol, you're smiling. There are 5 ways of being, and Carol Jocelyn is. All right, there are 5, and with their sand tray stuff. All right, there are 5 ways of being with. One is cognitively. I hear you. Cognitively, left brain. That's one way of being with. It's very powerful. I was trained in that. Boston Psychoanalytic, I was trained in that. People would get better. My people would get better. Model 2, being with. So model 1 is objective neutrality, a neutral object, the objectivity of a surgeon, the blank screen onto which the patient projects and displaces. That's one way of being with. Be a blank screen, be with, as a surgeon. Model 2, empathic attunement. Join alongside them. Decenter from your own countertransference. Be with them. Model 3, authentic engagement. All ways of being with. Okay, now model 4, devoted mother. Devoted mother. You're there. I know people are signing off. I'm just about done. As a devoted mother, a facilitating environment. Nancy Williams, when she's just doing her beautiful thing, she just is a facilitating environment. She's so lovely. But anyway, being with, providing a space, a safe space for them to regress, to redo. So non-judgmental. That's a way of being with, as a devoted primary maternal preoccupation. Hello, Winnicott. Absolutely being with. Okay, now number 5, as an alchemist. We had some words for this when I taught my course at William James, a something alchemist. But anyway, you are envisioning, and you're be with. So it's a triangle. The patient and the therapist and the envisioned possible self. There's a triangle, that triangle. And so being with and envisioning together, co-creating the vision of what could be. The envisioned and quantum possibility of what could be. That's a way of being with. Oh, yes, I did it. So thank you, Carol. There are 5 ways of being with. And then in model 6, which hasn't happened yet, the being with by way of somatically, although again, I'm sorry, just have to say this. I know you guys are dropping like flies here, but let me just say, thank you, Gina, for staying on. Thank you, Mitch. But anyway, and hello, Sean, for smiling there. All right, the 6th one, and I had conversations with dear Pat Ogden, bless her soul, and at some big thing back in the 1990s about body-oriented therapy. And I gave a whole day, and Bessel van der Kolk gave a whole day, and Pat Ogden gave a whole day. And that's when I met Pat Ogden. And I was like drawn to her like as to a magnet. Now she's very tall and I'm relatively shortish. And she and I just walked around arm in arm for the entire 5 days. But one thing that and Al Peso was there. One thing that she acknowledged, and we've talked about since, is some of the body-oriented approaches don't really talk about what's going on in the therapist's body, but in the patient's body. So that countertransference, not always so much there. And certainly Al Peso, dear Al Peso, may rest in peace, that's not really about the therapist countertransference, or it's a whole nother way of being. I don't know, but there are different ways of being with. But anyway, model 6, I'll get to that probably. I'll get to that in the next 5 years. Okay, the being with. Okay, good. Carol Willis, thank you. 5 ways of being with. She likes it. Carol Willis likes it. Oh, good. She likes it. All right, well, I think I got to the end. And I want to say, I know Gina's going to come on here. I want to say, bless you all. I see that you're still here. It means a lot to me. And Carol's smiling so much, and Mita's still here, and Donna, I love it, and Fiona with 3 names. I know you didn't have to be here, and yet you are. John still Parkerson, and Richard Kim. So Richard Kim, I guess, is the wonderful stuff about the ISTDP. Is that right, or was it another Richard? But I think it was Richard Kim, and Mitch, of course, and Maria, and Emily, and Joan. It wasn't Richard Kim. Richard, yes, it was. I think there's a yes. I nodded yes. Good. So yes, ISTDP is a base, and then build the 5 on top of that. Yes, indeedy. And then Jane, and then Sarah. So listen, thank you all. I'm ready to give it over to Gina, and to thank Gina so much for inviting me and letting me run over by 52 minutes. I'm sorry. I had to. I couldn't help it.
Yes, thank you so much, Martha. I think the last comment was the best way to end, which is being with. And you have been such a wonderful person for me personally and in this setting to be with us. I mean, this is such a gift, and any extra time is so welcome because I love being with you. And I want to thank everyone for being here with us and learning together. And it's just really nice to be able to continue digesting this very rich material, 125 years of psychoanalytic history and theory.
She's not saying that I'm 125 years old. I mean, I may be 50 years into this, but I don't think she means I'm
No,
125.
not you being 125, but you've digested 125
I know that.
years of psychoanalytic theories for us. And this is such a gift. Your heart, your mind, your soul, just you doing this with all your being is such a gift. And
Aw.
I thank you, Martha, and I thank everyone for
And
being
I'm coming back in April. April.
And you are. You're coming back in April 25th. So save the date, mark your calendar, because Dr. Stark is going to be talking about memory as a verb and not a noun.
Can
So
we all unmute to say thank you?
Yes. I
Thank you.
mean,
yes,
yes, could that
thank you.
be?
Thank you,
Thank
Martha.
Martha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's been for
Thank you.
Dr. Stark's
Thank you, Gina.
spot supervision. And
Oh, that's Maria. Hello, Maria. Good to see you.
And
yes,
thank you, Gina.
yes, thank
And
you.
there's
Thanks,
Christine.
Gina, for doing a great job on this.
Oh, thank you.
Fabulous.
So sign up for my spot supervision Zoom sessions, or just sign up and listen to the recordings. Nobody will ever know whether you listened or not.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
That's going to go out and I'll follow up with the email for everyone. So have a great rest of the weekend. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bless you
Thank you.
all.
Bye. Bye.
Gina, I have one question. What do we do about CME?
Oh, you mean the CEUs, the continuing education? I'm going to send a follow-up email. You will receive a link to fill out the survey, and then
Okay.
you'll receive your CEU certificate.
So are they good for CMU, like for medical doctors also?
I do it through the Psychological Association, APA, so I don't know if that applies to CME, so you'll have to check with your board.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you,
And
Mina.
maybe Sean and Gina stay on and we can just
Yes,
talk
yes,
amongst
great.
ourselves.
Yes.
Yes, please. And Mitch
Thank
too.
you. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank
Bye-bye,
you.
Fiona.
Bye.
There's Sean,
Bye.
Mitch and Jane. Bye-bye, Jane. And Jane. Bye-bye to Jane.
Okay, so
Jane is still on or?
I can,
Okay, good.
okay. So,
Well.
thank you so
And
much.
so you've stopped the recording now.
I'm stopping it now. Thank you.
Okay, good.